bonds?
Opportunity to review the requisitions.
Yes,
I'm fine with them.
Yes.
okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. Barney, right?
Thank you. It's good to be back. I guess I distributed the year-end reports. They show that we've been holding steady on our weighted average income on the portfolio of slightly over 0.8% for the last third of last year. I finished January's yesterday, and we're up slightly from that. So hopefully we've hit our bottom. The consensus seems to be that rates will be heading up going forward. I'm hearing some folks that have made really good calls on interest rate futures in the past, say they don't think that's going to happen. They think that inflation's going to stop down and rates are going to go back down.
They're crazy.
Well,
Do not listen to them.
at least they've made very good guesses in the past.
They have
So
no idea what they're talking about.
I hope you're right. In either case, we're positioning the portfolio to be able to handle the cash draws that will be needed this year to cover the tax holiday, and to maximize the returns that we can get out of the portfolio going forward.
So are you buying on I mean, the curve is definitely flattening. Short term is going up. I mean,
And
they're
we have
raising
been buying
short-term rates.
we've been picking up yield with commercial paper that has helped us. That's why we've come up now as a result of
Yeah, because
commercial
I
paper.
mean, I would say don't buy long-term bonds right now. in
Well,
this.
we can only go out 5 years,
Yeah.
so.
But that is long-term to us.
Okay,
Compared
yes.
to what you're doing in a lot of stuff, but that's, yeah,
We're doing very little of that. We occasionally will do something, but it's certainly not any aggressive program to extend our overall
these are
maturity.
probably the same people that said inflation was transitory 7 months ago, when we came out and said it's not transitory. It's,
No, they aren't.
okay.
There are a couple of other things that I wanted to mention for the committee, for record purposes. We've gotten a notice from U.S. Bank. They are the custodian of our investment securities. They have formed a trust subsidiary and have transferred all of their trust activity to this subsidiary. I don't believe it changes anything, but they sent us a notice that they're doing that. We also had an interesting situation with the Ohio Pooled Collateral System 2 weeks ago. On the day we had on the Thursday we had the ice storm. After the offices had closed here and LCNB had closed, we got $54 million wired in from 2 mortgage processing companies to our account at the bank. That without any notice, without ever telling us ahead of time, that deposit pushed LCNB into violation with the Ohio Pooled Collateral System because they didn't have enough collateral to fix that. They came in, and before 9 o'clock Friday morning, they had that uncollateralized position covered, and were very forthright about communicating that with us. But the system kicked out notices that they were under collateralized, which is a black mark. I really feel like it's a black mark because we didn't tell them, but we didn't tell them because the mortgage processing outfits didn't tell us. And if we had known even on Thursday before things closed down, they had already closed the bank at 1 o'clock before the wires came in. It was a real mess of a situation. The last thing about Ohio Pooled Collateral, First National, Warren County, has finally joined the Ohio Pooled Collateral System, mostly because we pushed them. We had $7 million in CDs with them that were collateralized under the old system, where they'd give us a report once every 3 months, and basically could pull the collateral out in between. We had a situation a couple of years ago where They ended up at the end of a quarter under collateralized on our account. I'd been after them for a long time to go ahead and get in the system and give us some options. Early in December, we had $4 million in those CDs mature, and we pulled the money out. And when they asked us why, I said I wasn't going to have money that potentially was uncollateralized there. They told me they'd get in the system. They'd been talking about, I mean, I've been hearing for over a year that they were going to become part of the Ohio Pooled Collateral System to secure those public funds, and they hadn't done anything. Bob Harlow told me he'd have it done by the end of the year. It finally happened last week, but they are participating in the pooled collateral system, and so we do have First National, the Herdman institution. It seems pretty clear we precipitated that, and you know, I'm comfortable with that. I'm tired I was tired of running the risks. Those are really all that's been going on in the portfolio. Things in the portfolio have been pretty quiet, and we've just been rolling maturities and frankly, actually getting a little bit shorter, so we do have plenty of liquidity this year to meet the cash draw that we'll need to fund the tax holiday. We have gotten very favorable responses from taxpayers in a number of ways. People have come in, people have called, people have sent emails appreciating the commissioner's actions to have a tax holiday for the county. We've also had a whole lot of people who've called us and said, I didn't get any tax holiday, my bill this year is higher than it was last year. And then we explained to them that, well, your property was reappraised, and the reappraisal took your bill up more than the tax holiday took it down. And so it'll go up again next year, which makes people real happy. But that's basically what's been going on. We've been fighting COVID. We're moving forward with the business of the office. Are there any questions that I can answer? That's all I've got.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Matt. Thank you.
Well, first item here at 9:15 is the presentations from our respondents to the fiber RFQ. We pulled in our top three. Our first one is on for 9:15, and I just sent a text to.
I think they're out in the hall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Let me-
think they're waiting in the hall.
Okay, let me go bring them in, and then we'll get them set up, and they'll be giving you a
I
presentation.
think that's what Laura said. She told them to just wait in the hall.
Because they're not allowed to hear each other's, correct? Isn't that the way it works?
We're in a public
Yeah,
hearing.
typically you want to keep the bids, that you wouldn't disclose the bids to each other until after you enter the contract.
Yeah, we can't force them, I don't think, to be out, but by practice, most companies have let the other companies present by themselves.
So is the fact that this is being broadcast on Facebook Live, is that presenting a problem for
I
us?
think it's okay. I think there's for some, this was a request for proposals, but if you're going to do a meeting and you have to meet with the proposal, it has to be a public record. So I think it's okay, but I would not give out the pricing or the public records request or anything like that on the SITENET statute. But if you want to meet with them, you have to do so in public, so that's sort of best case scenario. Best practice would be just to have them come in one time.
We're on Facebook Live now?
We've been.
So I know, well, there's a difference in YouTube and Facebook Live.
YouTube Live.
Okay.
morning.
So our first presentation is going to be it's a joint response to the RFQ from a firm called Cellsite Capital, and they joined forces with Bricker and Eckler. So I'm going to pass out copies of their presentation for you.
Need one for the record.
Head up by myself here? Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Chris Bland. I'm the founder of Cellsite Capital, and we are also with,
Shannon Martin, I'm with Bricker and Eckler, and I'm doing a lot on our ARPA and broadband guidance for clients.
great, thanks. Well, I'll jump right into it. In the packet that we just passed out to you, obviously we're here based on the RFQ that was put out by this office on the 19th of December of last year, which is basically to go over the associated costs with broadband deployment, also putting a design together for that, and then ultimately what Shannon just talked about, using the ARPA funds to actually fund that. So on page 3, just a little bit about our firm. We are based in Columbus, Ohio. I founded the company in 2013. Last year, we had a very good year. We were able to create $161 million of value of assets for our clients. And most notably, we had funded the single largest venue revenue deal ever in our space. And that was done with a major U.S. airport that we deal with. And out of all those things, the reason why we're successful in doing that is everything that we have listed below there, from the data collection and the analysis to the presentation and content creation, contract negotiation, revenue, code, zoning, and then ultimately the long-term asset. We do all of that in-house, so we do not farm that out to different companies. So we're able to do that in a very quick and equitable fashion. On page 4, we have a list of some of our current clients. So those are the ones that we are current and actively engaged with. Those are not previous clients. Those are the ones that we are currently actively involved with today. I won't go over all of those names. As you know, you can see just who some of those are, including transportation, government, private companies, healthcare, utilities, the whole gamut. We have a lot of different verticals. And the way that we approach projects like this, really all the questions that most people have are all the same. The answers are always different, depending on each different community and what they're looking for out of the project. So our methodology is very similar for just about every project. The way that we go through it is we analyze everything, clear down to what the price is, who's delivering it, is it really there, is it not there? And we do all that by combining different databases in order to do it, and I'll tell you why we do it that way here in a moment. And then we also look at what assets you might have available for development. That's the best way to do it, rather than, you know, willy-nilly. You go and look, is there land, is there property, is there assets, vertical assets that we can use? And then we also prioritize based on your needs, whether it's underserved or not served at all in that community, especially in Warren County. There's some of those areas that you want to take care of and connect with broadband. And then after we do all of those and make sure that they're sequenced, then we do a high-level design on what it should actually end up looking like. And feel free to stop me if you have any questions at any time while we go through this. But in page 6, and this is really important, because from a publicly available mapping system, the FCC puts out what they call their Form 477. And those are maps that are created. And I have 2 maps as an example of Warren County here. And if you actually look at the top one on the left-hand side, you'll notice a lot of it's blue. Because according to these maps, 99.72% of the county is actually covered with 3 or more providers for broadband. Now, what's that include? It includes satellite, older technologies that may or may not really be fast enough to under the definition of broadband, which is a very low bar at this point, which is 25 megs download and 3 up. You cannot do a Zoom call probably with 3 megs up, right? So that's information that you're pushing rather than you're just receiving. And so that is the definition of broadband currently by the FCC. And that's why it looks like you guys have 3 or more. to every household in the community. If you look at the bottom one to the right, if we remove some of those technologies out that are satellite, that are prone to not work as advertised, then you get a little bit truer of an understanding of what's there. The other issue with these maps are it's done by census blocking, which means it could be miles of any given block in any sector. And if you have one home, one address in that area that is covered, they deem that entire area as being covered. And that's the biggest problem with pulling FCC data right now and making sure that what you're really being served in the community. So we don't really rely on any of this. We use it as a benchmark, but then we actually go into a granular level on an address by address basis moving forward. There's also no checks and balances to this map, which means twice a year, the providers, the ISP, gives information to the FCC and says, here's where we're at, or more importantly, we can be there within 10 business days. So it's really self-reporting, and they don't check any of this data. And that's the data, if you go to the FCC website, is what you look at today. So if you were to go there today, you would look at it and say, we have plenty of broadband in this area, right? So that's really what everybody uses today as a benchmark for communities and whether they're serviced or not.
So how does this compare with other I mean, again, we're laymen, we're not in this business, and you see 99.72% are have not just one provider, but 3 providers.
Yeah.
And you're just saying that's not necessarily, you know, a fact because it's somewhat self-reported, but that's what the providers are claiming, or that you can have a satellite dish here, they do have a satellite dish in this area, what have you, which provides some connectivity, but you're saying that those are based on somewhat old standards from the FCC, that it's not necessarily in the streaming world of today?
Well, remember, when they're reporting this, they're reporting the maximum speed, meaning in a perfect environment. And the best example that you can give is if you were trying to get to downtown Cincinnati at 8:30 in the morning, I don't care if you have a Ferrari, you're not going 100 miles an hour. Now, if you try to get there at 3 in the morning, you probably can because there's nobody on the road. So the more people that are on that, especially when you talk DSL or satellite or fixed wireless, it's a pipe essentially. And the more people that are in that pipe, just like with your cell phone, if your data slows down in a really populated area, that same thing happens with some of these other technologies. All that they have to report is what their maximum speed is. So it doesn't really translate to real world what you can actually get. There was a report yesterday that came out that said today, because of being in the middle of a pandemic, if you had 2 children at home, as well as 2 parents trying to work from the home, you would need at least 100 upload. Their standard is only 3, right? You cannot really do it in that environment. And that's why most communities are endeavoring to kind of take control of that on their own, because the reporting is, give me your best case scenario and how fast this will go. And that's what's being reported. So how do you, the reason why we like to extract, especially satellite, is because satellite companies have been giving money to provide broadband. And if you have satellite home internet at home, I'm sorry, it's not effective. It really does not work, right? At least in a stable environment, you're going to get speeds that'll fluctuate massively. So that's why we like to eliminate that when we look at FCC data. So you're not unlike anybody else, Commissioner. Everybody typically, if they got a direct line of sight, can get satellite. Technically, that's a service provider that'll do broadband, the definition of what the FCC said, which is 25 megabits down and 3 up. Right? So that's why we remove it, to try to get a true understanding. Then that next layer of the mapping is that if one of those census blocks, like on the eastern part of the county, I'm quite certain that there's very limited, if any, broadband internet choices over there. But if you have one home in that entire block, you know, you'll see more of the yellowish, the lighter color. If one spot in that area actually is covered, they can report it as the entire census block is being covered. Right? So that's really the problem with the today's standard that you're going to get from the FCC. That's why we don't rely on it, nor should you, frankly. Right? So, in the way that we do that is, if you go to page 7, when we do our assessment, we basically look at it from just a really in-depth level. So this is a client, the first 2 that you see on the left, we also do wired broadband, which is what you have today with a Spectrum or a Lumen or CenturyLink or somebody of that ilk. Wireless broadband would be, if you've seen the internet ads at the Super Bowl, which I'm sure every one of you watched, is that it was, they were touting broadband, whether it was from Verizon to the home or T-Mobile from the home. That is done basically through a cellular network. So it's really not true. I would not rely on that as reliable broadband. We can get into that in a moment. And then, so I shouldn't say surprisingly, but I was really pleased to see that there's actually sufficient fiber routes. There's a lot of entry points with different companies. And if the map that's all the way on the right-hand side there, that is actually of the county. And those are publicly available, leasable fiber routes. And that's a great place to start, because then you can start piggybacking what's already there. If you start building in an area where there's already service, usually you get strong pushback from the incumbents. But the fact that you can partner with them and lease some space, build new spaces, it ends up working out better from a dollar for dollar perspective. It's a good way to start. You guys actually have a really good starting point for fiber in the county when you look at it collectively. So that's the first place we start when we talk about gathering resources and looking at what's available today. And then on page 8, when we talk about getting to a granular level, this is also a client, and we literally get to the point where we can tell you the delivery method, whether it's cable, whether it's wireless, whether it's fiber, as well as what those speeds are, and probably just as important today is how much it's priced at. So as this example, you'll see the little balloon that popped up there, that is one of 9. So we have 9 different data points on that specific address in that area for everything that's available to them in that market. So we want you to know, because usually we try to look at this as not as an event, but as a starting point. So what we do is we put that data into a database, which you guys do have software in your GIS that will allow you to put this and layer that in so that you can look at that in real time.
Can I ask a kindergarten level question?
Absolutely.
What are we trying to accomplish by hiring you or doing this? We've talked about all these terms of, oh, we've got this money, we need more broadband. What are we trying to accomplish by engaging with you?
I think the RFQ was written to basically understand where you're starting at. What do we have? What's available today? Where do we need to build? What assets can we use to grow broadband in the community? And where can we expand that to cover the entire county, as I think the gist of the RFQ.
So your company looks at where we stand today, where should we be, and are giving us recommendations how to get there?
Yeah, so our goal would be if you just hire us to do this assessment, that we give you enough that you can carry on with or without us, that you have a great starting point. The problem is what do you do to get to that starting point, and is it enough detail to where you can really go on and start growing that, the broadband in your community so that everybody has access to high-speed, broadband. But until you know what you truly have, you overbuild in some areas, you underbuild in some areas. And so what we try to do is, based on what your assessment of your need is and what you're trying to accomplish, we then build a plan based around what your goals in that community are. And then we say, here's your priority list, this is what you should do moving forward, and here's how you fund it.
But why is it the public should be involved, or a county like ours? Why should we be doing this? Doesn't the private sector already provide this service?
Yeah, and in most cases, the reason why the private sector is not in some of these areas, it's either because it's too expensive for them to get there, or they run a monopoly or duopoly in most cases, where you have really 1 or 2 providers that have wired services into those communities. So what you don't want to do is replace that. What you're trying to do is create a healthy, competitive environment. And the way to do that is by creating assets, mostly due to fiber. That's the best way to do it, where you're creating conduit and pathways so that you don't end up with just 1 or 2 providers in a given area. You're creating the, whether it's a conduit system, or if you want to pull your own fiber, which in most communities, depending on the situation, is not the best way to do it, but invest in the infrastructure to do that. The reason why there's not a lot of small providers in most areas is not because they don't want to be, it's because they can't afford to create all of those pathways. So our recommendation is to create something that's more open access, so the current incumbents commissioner can be there, but you're also inviting the smaller, more local-based ISPs to actually be able to come in and offer that same service. Because in most cases, they're providing better service, usually at a lower cost, than what you're going to get from somebody on a national level.
So when the private companies they're privately investing in providing this type of service to their customers, and they're investing in the infrastructure that would provide that service. And now what we're talking about is doing something that competes with that, or gives some other people that couldn't compete with the bigger people a chance to compete with them? And is that something that the bigger people can come in and use our service too? Or are they gonna say, boy, we've made this big investment, we've made the capital investment to do this, now you're basically spending public money for our competitors and giving an advantage to them as opposed to our investment that we've made privately? Do they have an objection to this kind of thing, those people?
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. And what I would tell you is that that's why you don't want to build in an area where they already are. If you have sufficient service down this road, there's really no need out of the gate to make that your priority, because somebody is having service that is available to them on that road. What you're really trying to do, especially with the ARPA funds, is there, and I'll let Shannon get into that, there's certain requirements that you have in order to use the money. And you're not trying to overbuild an area. You're trying to basically take the current resources that are there, along with the private networks that are there, and then start expanding it from there. So you're doing really two things. One is you're not directly competing with them when you're going into an area where they don't provide that service. So what you're going to do then is allow them to say, hey, if you allow us to use this, we're putting this in, you can use that, and that will help you to complete and stretch the dollar and the investment that you're actually making. When you first go in, especially the incumbent, the first thing that they usually say is, we don't like this plan. And then when you explain to them what is going on and how you're doing it, they're a lot more amenable to the actual project. But typically, you're going to get some pushback from whoever the incumbent is, no matter what. But the goal is not to compete with them. The first goal should be to find the underserved or not served areas and find out how to get there. And most of the time, especially with the current available fiber network that's available within the county, is you're expanding their service as well. It'd be different if you were building right on top of them, which is not how we recommend to start. We recommend to go to the place where nobody is going to have necessarily an objection for you to get there. Because our history has been that once you actually go to those places, the one that really balked the most at it usually is the one that says, okay, we need to be there too. What can we do to get there? And then that's when you can start leveraging both the community open access that you've just created along with their private network in order to connect back where you need to be with the fiber.
Aren't a lot of these incumbents also getting public money from the FCC to do this sort of work? And, one of the things that strikes me, I happen to live in the area that is the lightest green in the FCC map.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with, in the evening, not being able to stream at
Right.
all. For example, there is no competition. I don't care what that map says. There
Right.
just isn't.
Yeah.
Unless I think getting a satellite dish on a townhome is actually doable, which I can assure you it's not.
Yeah.
It is, if incumbent providers are given public dollars and they're using the map to justify not using those public dollars to further invest, especially since they're the incumbent and they're the largest provider there, would this allow us the opportunity to say, hey, incumbent provider, you too have public dollars. This isn't actually being well served. How can we leverage your public dollars and our public dollars to be able to serve the public the best?
100%, Commissioner. And that's usually what happens is, well, I shouldn't say usually. That's the goal, right? You want them, and they're typically still shareholder beholden, meaning they're going to go where there's the most density that meets the minimum requirement so they can spend money there, because typically that's where they're going to make the most. Where you start getting into these rural parts of the community where they're like, well, we've got to build all of these out first, and then we're going to use the money if there's any left to get to that point. And that's really where from a government, we can really bridge that gap. So in your community specifically, what you're talking about, what you'd want to do is find the best, most economical way to connect that entire community. And based on what I've seen on the map, it would be good to try to partner with the public sector to try to get there. So you would not want to take this on without kind of encouraging. The risk in that is that they finally go, well, I don't want to be there. Or if you're going to be there, I'm going to lower, and we see that in some cases where they'll go in and they will lower their price, give you more speed just to stop you from building there.
Yeah, but even if we were to not invest any public dollars, ARPA dollars, in a plan that you or someone else puts forward, having this information, though, dramatically changes the conversation that we have with incumbent providers, especially those who are given lots of federal dollars to build this out, to say, you're telling us, you're showing me this FCC map, and I'm telling you as the customer what my experience actually is every single night. You need to do some investing in this area to ensure that the customers are actually getting the service that you say is being provided. I mean, I see that as being as valuable as for a tool for us to make sure our community gets what it needs. You know, even if we don't take it the next step to say, okay, how do we invest ARPA dollars in this instance in a way that, you know, leverages one another, which I think is, you know, that's certainly a really good thing to look at too. We do have this opportunity to do that too. But it seems to me knowing this information gets me beyond the conversation which I've actually had with my provider who showed me this actual map that does nothing for all of the customers in a dense community who have no choices and have terrible service.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And they rely on giving you available, because they don't want to give you anything that's proprietary to them. So they will tell you that this is served per this map, and you can say, well, no, it's not. And that's the reason why we do the really granular detail that we do. So when you include that into your, you can make decisions based on that information inside of your walls yourself. You don't need to go to an outside provider, because you could say, well, I know this is covered, or I know it's not covered. And more importantly, as you grow the community, if you have that information, you can then, when you open up the roads, you know, more of a dig once policy, you can throw that in. It's so much cheaper to do it when the road's open. But to your point, even if you decide not to take anything further, having that data is extremely valuable. Then you just want to make sure that it continues to grow.
And I'll chime in real quick, nothing to add on the technical, that was exactly right, but the way these federal funds are working for the providers versus how they're working under ARPA versus other sources, marrying that up and kind of putting the patchwork together of the quilt to get to those underserved areas is a little bit of a trick, because what the providers have to do to qualify for their funding is a little bit different than what you're going to do as a governmental entity to bring maybe fiber to an underserved area. And so, you know, their source of funding is really driven toward affordability and that last mile, and you have maybe a little more flexibility to fill in the middle mile or to fill in some other segments, and it really does become this, you know, how are you building out the network for affordability and reliability?
I didn't hear the answer to a question, or maybe it wasn't really a question that Commissioner Jones asked, but she was mentioning in response to my question to you and responding to it, that certain of the incumbent providers are provided maybe with a subsidy, or they were provided with some sort of a incentive program from the federal government for putting in broadband in an area. Does that happen? Is that the case? So, because I was raising the issue of whether or not we were now competing with private incumbent providers in a way that could be considered by them and or the public as being unfair or not having a level playing field. So I believe that Commissioner Jones was then making a point that I don't know whether it's true or false, but maybe you all know. How are the incumbents, are they provided some special thing that other people, that other providers are not provided to make it not fair? So in other words, I don't think that there's, if they are provided something but it's given to everybody, including providers that aren't doing something, that I don't consider to be as interesting. But it would be interesting if there's people that are given special treatment.
Well, I wouldn't, so what had happened on the funding side of it is about a year ago, there was an auction that basically said, what do you need to subsidize in order to build out the area? And what happened in a very dramatic fashion is whoever the incumbent was said, oh, I can handle all that. I'll do it, you know, for 5% subsidy, meaning they're covering the 95% and the federal government's only counting the 5%. I'm sorry, but if you can do that at 95%, you could do it at 100%. But essentially what they've done, because there's no, if you don't use that money, you don't build it out, Commissioner, you just, at a certain point, when they decide to claw it back, they go, okay, well, here's the money. And they basically have 3 years to kind of get that was the window to use it. But if they don't use it, all they do is give it back. And now you have for 3 years, nothing's been built because they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and do this. And that's why when we, use the term open source network, you're not creating your network. I would not advise, especially on a county level, to become a service provider. What I would suggest is that you look at why they're not in some of those areas. And for the most part, it's due to the economics just don't work to them. And the problem that we've always had is from an FCC standpoint is we've spent a lot of time and money subsidizing the high-cost providers instead of getting to the high-cost customer. Meaning they've been given a lot of money to get there and they just haven't. They've used it to make a more robust system and offer faster speeds of where they're at, not to extend the network necessarily. That's been done by small ISPs who have said, I'm going to go out here, and it's mostly due to Commissioner, what you're talking about. Somebody finally says, it's not that difficult to do this. I'm going to go raise some money, and I'm going to build it myself. Then they build it, and then the big incumbents come in and go, well, look, I'm either going to swallow you up and put you out of business, or you can just sell to me. And that's usually how a lot of these, the more rural communities end up getting connected. That doesn't happen in all cases. But what we've seen
But
is.
isn't that the way the free market's supposed to work?
It is, unless you're using the federal money, government money to do it. You're basically locking down for 2 or 3 years a whole community while they don't get that. And the best way is in real world experience. We don't have to scream anymore what we do. Because of COVID, everybody needs this service. They need robust services at home, whether it's a kid trying to learn. And if that person has access to YouTube and a high quality internet connection, I can tell them, regardless of what their income level is, they can get the same information as this person in a higher income bracket whose parents, make 10 times as much as theirs. And the reason why healthcare is so expensive at the end of life, and you see a lot of our rural communities drying up a little bit, is because they have to be put in areas where they can be monitored, which is typically in a home, not in their home, because they don't have the capability of doing it out there. So in some cases, yes, some people build to be sold. But within ISP world, a lot of those, the companies that grow, there's a lot of really large companies and a lot of really small companies, because it's that middle piece to where it's really expensive to grow, Commissioner, that they just can't come up with all the funding. And so what the big incumbents have done, which we just talked about, they've taken very limited subsidies, and there's no ramifications if they don't use it, other than that community wasn't able to grow because it didn't go to somebody who maybe needed 40 or 50%.
You're obviously really super sharp on this subject, so we appreciate picking your brain a little bit. And you're the first one before us, so I think you're getting the brunt of some of the.
I love it.
more-
Keep
more
coming.
Strategic
Yeah.
questions or 30,000-foot questions. So in some ways, I almost view this as like a public utility.
Yes,
And-
that's the right way to look at it.
But with public utilities are not extended everywhere. That, if you choose to live in a rural area and there's 5 of you in a 5-mile radius, you're not getting a sewer line publicly funded out there. You chose to live out there. That's where you live. We're not extending that. So and then we'll wait, they have the opportunity to purchase a satellite and that would kind of cover them. But what you're saying is, in reality, that doesn't really provide that much. We, as a society, should be thinking about putting up a small tower network to get those 5 homes in that 5-mile radius coverage. That's essentially what we're talking about, right?
Yes, well, yeah. The utility argument is a good one. The difference is I can dig a well and I can put a septic tank in.
Right.
If you can't do that with a quality connection, right, and that's a choice that you could end up
But
making.
that's where I was equating
No,
to
yeah, absolutely.
the satellite dish. You
Yeah,
didn't have
it's
that
a-
choice.
Well, we
Right.
require I think a telephone utility is more apples to apples comparison. We do by federal and state law require
Right.
telephone companies to provide to that last house. That is a safety
Yeah.
issue. It is required to do it. Cell phones have dramatically changed that conversation, and so investments and subsidy discussions continue to happen with that older technology. But we do require with some utilities that they're in the public interest and that they must be served. It's must carry, they must be, we have a
Yeah.
must be served provision. And I think that what the pandemic has elevated for us is broadband is one of those services that we could be isolating people more and more from the economy by not ensuring that there is affordable choices in the marketplace. I mean, that to me is a more apples to apples comparison of what's happening.
Yeah, Commissioner, and really what you're seeing happen is you have this convergence of federal money being available, this need for broadband due to the pandemic, and now, it happened a few years ago, actually, where the price of fiber is actually less than cable. So when you're talking about legacy phone lines, they're more expensive to operate, they're more expensive to take care of rather than new fiber. And so we've got this now where fiber used to be really expensive. It's actually less on even a per megabit basis than what you would get from a cable provider. So you have all these things going along with that, as well as an economic development tool. And we see that a lot. If you can move that data, it's a direct correlation on how and where the population tends to grow.
And Matt, we're giving him a little more time since we're getting him off track.
Just as a reminder that we have.
Well, let me get to obviously, this is a request for a proposal to provide us with a report on analyzing our current system and what your recommendations are for it. But, so why is it that, because there's a competition now going on with this, why is it that we should choose you and you're as the provider of this report for us over other people?
Well, based on our experience, what I can tell you, and I don't want to take up too much time because I want Shane to talk about ARPA funds because it's a really important aspect of how you end up growing this. But we don't outsource this. I mean, this is stuff that we work on. So if you need something, you call us. You deal with somebody that works directly for me that's an employee that this is all that they do. So we have everything from the negotiation side to the data side to the building side to the long ongoing asset management. So we build towers, we take them down, we deal in fiber networks. All of these things, since we've been doing it, this is all we do. So we don't have to farm it out to 3 different companies that are 3 different silo companies that based on what's the priority within that organization on how quickly or how a job progresses. But our job ultimately is to provide you, Commissioner, with enough information that regardless of whatever actions you decide to take or not take, that you're confident in the data that we had given you so you can make that assessment on where it's best to use your money. And that's ultimately what our goal is. But if you need us to stick around to the end, we start these projects and then we stay with them. That list of clients that we had showed you those are current active clients. That's not like, hey, this is who we've dealt with in the past, since 2013, the last 9 years. This is current companies. And every single one of those contracts started just like this, which is.
Did you provide us with a bid on the amount of money to do the report?
We did, yes.
And how was that communicated to us?
We have it in writing in their response for, in their proposal. I think they estimated an all-in cost, and then they also,
They give us a price proposal that estimated an all-in cost, and I think they also, if there's legal services involved, Bricker discussed their hourly for the, sort of a blended hourly rate, but that, you have all that in writing in your, their response for the RFP.
All right, and that is in our package here?
I do not believe that you have that since we can't really disclose that at this point in time, but we can provide that to you after.
All right, very good, thank you.
But its core, you do the report, you do the assessment, but then you're saying my company is also the preferred provider to actually go fix this.
Yeah, and we don't want to fix the problem today. What we want to do is build it so in 5 years, you never have this problem again. And because of the way that networks are developed and the time and resources needed to do it, here's a great example. Today, especially if some of you have teenagers, you're using about 10 to 11 gigs a month in data on your cell phone. And you have an unlimited plan, so you probably don't care. By 2026, that plan's going to jump to 53 gigs per month per device, which means the capacity has to be 4 times what it is today just to be able to serve the same type of user experience you have today. That's all done through fiber. And so when you embark on expanding fiber to these communities, even when you talk wireless or a tower, it's still connected to fiber in almost every case. If you see a microwave dish on something that's either probably some public service or it's a company that doesn't have data, a wired line into that cell tower, so they're trying to do that by transferring it 20, 30 miles, a direct line of sight, right? And that's why it's an important endeavor to take on, because you as a community, if you handle that and do that, you're not just opening it up to more, better competition, better service in the area, but now you have the ability to know where things are starting to move, which comes into that funding piece of it. And if you just want to go jump to slide 11, I'll let Shannon take over from here, and then I'll step aside in case you guys have any more questions.
Yeah, and I don't really have a lot to add. ARPA funding has, rules on how you spend that money, but it may not just be ARPA. So when he talks about this, report he's going to give you that maps out the options for maximizing your spend on the infrastructure piece of it, what we can do is, one, make sure that that's going to, if you're interested in using ARPA dollars for it, that it's going to comply, and you're going to have an audit trail for that, and the documentation you need to support that. But then it may also involve, how do we maximize efficiency and reduce costs, because now we can leverage township road assets, and, the fiber's going to go here, and what's the best way to get to those underserved areas in the most cost-effective way, and we can kind of layer in what agreements might be recommended to collaborate with either ISPs in the area or with other jurisdictions like school districts, and leverage tall towers if you have to bounce off of fiber, from the fiber out of the ground. So we'll kind of layer in on their report where we see, knowing what we know about the goals and objectives of the community, how to get there in a cost-effective way that also complies with any ARPA or other funding you're using. Any questions on that? Okay.
Any last questions for me before I? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Helpful.
Yes, thank you.
The first guy always gets
Right by the third one. Wow, I'm an expert.
Yeah.
Got a PhD in this.
Thank you.
Yeah, you helped educate us we just said by the third presentation, I gotta say I'm in kindergarten, I've got a PhD.
That's the problem, right? There's so much to it, so, but, it's just the start.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next firm is Environmental Design Group, so I'm going to allow them to get settled and come up here, and I'm going to load up a quick little video clip that they had. Is it okay to unplug this one? Okay.
How's everybody doing today?
Well, thank you.
Morning.
Good morning. Who's that handsome guy?
We get a video and everything? Wow.
Just control it there whenever you.
I just have to make sure it starts, so. Good morning. Thank you for having us here today. I'm Frank Bronzo. I'm principal. I will be your project principal on this project. Real excited to be here today. A couple things I wanted to start off with. Our agenda here is going to show in about an 8-minute video. We're also going to pass out some handouts and then have a conversation and hopefully answer some questions. Our goal here today is to provide clarity to our proposed project approach. We want to start to provide some industry background to help educate you on making decisions moving forward. And we want to help start the dialogue to start moving the project forward. So with that, I'd like to introduce our video, and it's about an 8 or 10 minute video. It's all the way up to full volume.
Mic on there.
That helps.
We're good at talking too, so in case the video gets.
There's an old saying, in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you've been. It's been nearly 2 years since the initial work from home order was set in motion in the state of Ohio. Looking back prior to the pandemic, we observed communities that prioritized high-speed connectivity. They moved the needle forward. We noted businesses having more tools for growth and residents having the ability to experience a better quality of life. Legislation was passed that allocated monies to ensure the digital divide in Ohio was reduced, with the goal of one day eliminating the technological inequity. COVID-19 has accelerated the need for ubiquitous high-speed internet access and has placed a magnifying glass on the immediate need of high-speed broadband connectivity to learn, work, and function from home. The work from home order severely impacted the ability of workers, students, and residents who now found themselves relying entirely on their home internet connections to continue about their lives. This disproportionately impacted our rural communities, who lack high-speed broadband access, which is now seen as an essential utility. Your vision to improve the quality of life for regions, residents, and businesses echoes our mission to leave lasting impacts in the communities where we live, work, and raise our families. Your vision remains at the forefront as we share our project experience from other communities in Ohio, as we take this journey alongside you. When EDG partnered with the City of Fair Lawn in 2013, they were in the exact same position Warren County is. They recognized the need. They knew that both residents and businesses were being underserved by private industry, and they decided to step in and bridge the gap. Fair Lawn Gig has been nationally recognized for superior service and has one of the highest customer approval ratings of any ISP. Practically speaking, what does that mean? It means home value appreciation, new developments, new businesses, and retaining businesses that are already there. It means the ability for the city to deploy smart city technologies. It has opened up partnering opportunities in both public and private industry. Warren County has a great opportunity and is poised to be a regional leader in innovation. Why are we here today? We are here to imagine the possibilities, imagine growth opportunities, and imagine the future of Warren County, where nobody is left behind.
We know from experience on similar projects that the path to success heavily relies on a strong process refined by lessons learned. The path to success is also paved with outreach and a strong communications plan centered on Warren County's vision for success. We know most areas in the county have access to broadband, but what we don't know is if the incumbent service and providers are meeting the growing needs of businesses, government entities, students, or remote workers. The countywide survey and engagement piece of this study will help identify what pain points exist today to ensure that the county is making wide investments in solutions and addressing the most pressing problems of businesses and residents. We'll gather this much-needed information and data by meeting with groups of residents, business owners, corporations, public entities, and municipalities within the county. These meetings will serve the purpose of data collection as well as community outreach as we engage with the people of Warren County and share our knowledge about what a county-wide fiber program could mean for the region. We believe this to be a critical step in the process because it builds excitement and sets the final project up for a high residential and business adoption rate, which is key to a successful return on investment. Surveying your business and residential community at a grassroots level is critical to developing a plan of implementation for a broadband utility. This dataset will aid the analysis of a potential business model for the utility. We highly recommend the development of a project website or hub of information for the entire county to access ongoing information and updates about the project. The website will function as a central location for community engagement and outreach, as well as frequently asked questions and important contact information. The project website can also serve as a home for the survey, where we can actively direct digital traffic for improved engagement. The key element in understanding what types of fiber projects and investments are needed for the county is direct community engagement. Different communities are likely to have different needs and concerns, ranging from underserved residential areas to businesses that need fiber levels of speed to be competitive. By engaging with Warren County's communities, we can develop an understanding of what should be prioritized and move towards implementation.
We'll explore existing infrastructure, what existing assets are available in the county that will aid in implementation, operation, and maintenance of a broadband utility. Deciding on the mode of operation of a potential broadband utility is an important piece of the overall planning process. Is the utility something the county would like to operate, or should the utility be operated by a concessionaire? These are various questions to be answered when making this decision. Questions and answers will be unique to Warren County and its communities. Regardless, your decisions will often require a project champion who can rally public interest and pursue overall project implementation. We will provide information and deliverables so you can make important decisions for your community. Finally, we'll formulate the business plan. We'll help you determine how the utility service will be offered and when, and how the implementation will be phased. This will allow you to develop a schedule in alignment with the overall vision of the project. Environmental Design Group has worked with clients tasked with making similar fiscal decisions about how to best spend their resources to maximize value. Environmental Design Group has already started working on demographic and market research within Warren County and have started to see the following based on our initial findings. A combination of fiber to home and fixed wireless solutions will probably best meet the county's goals. The initiative Warren County is pursuing is no small task and will require careful planning to ensure the region realizes the most value with the monies budgeted. Environmental Design Group has already started looking at county assets and existing infrastructure. A deliverable of our study would include a phased plan that specifically meets the initial RFP requirements of serving both private and public interests and also fits within budget constraints. An existing data center currently exists in Mason City. The data center could be utilized as part of a 60-mile middle mile fiber ring. This ring would cost approximately $16 million in construction costs. With the current budget of $5 million, a feasibility study, complete or partial ring design, and a portion of construction can occur. Environmental Design Group will work with the county to identify specific projects that make the largest impact.
We believe this approach, when done properly, enhances the county's ability to continue to reduce the digital divide and will be the single most effective way to achieve social equality and growth in their communities. So what we're going to do is hand out these video pads that have this video on them so you can watch the video again. I know that's a lot of information, but our hope was to basically give you an overview of what we were thinking in terms of our project approach. And hopefully we answered some of the questions you may have already. I know you'll probably have some more. But with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to our project manager, David Snyder, who's going to walk you through the approach.
Nice to meet you. I'm Dave Snyder. I do want to hand this out while I'm talking. This is actually some fiber optic cable, so you can see what it's like, what actually gets installed in the ground. I have an 864 strand ribbon fiber here. here. So this is what we just installed around Akron. We did a 20-mile loop, and the project cost about $5 million, connecting county assets there. And this is loose strand cable, and this is a 432 count. So you can see, this is just an example of older technology and then some newer technology for fiber optic networks. Just don't touch the fiber so you get a splinter.
You can get to the computer.
You guys wanna see it? And if you
They
don't
don't
wanna
trust
see
me
it,
with that
if you
stuff.
just don't touch the ends.
Paul, why do these things have magnets on them that every backhoe in the county tends to try to find them?
That's a good point. Wait. We definitely, one of the things we do is with layout and coordination is try to avoid those type of conflicts and the backhoes hitting the fiber
So
infrastructure.
this is the old school one, this is
Yeah,
kind
that's-
of today's
Yeah,
model?
and they still use the loose tubes as well, but the difference is when you splice with the ribbon, you can see all the individual fibers across. You're way more efficient to splice in the field.
And each one of those carries a ton of
Yes.
data, correct?
And so, for example, a community might have, an entire city would have a 144 count fiber for their city that's coming off of an 864 count that would go feed it for an entire region. So there's tons of data. And one of the reasons, I know we handed out the placemats, when you have a ring that we showed connected, is that the reason why you form a ring is you double the capacity of your network just by connecting a ring. So you can just shoot directly to an area, but if you create a ring, that's how you optimize your infrastructure that you put in.
So you put in a ring, and again, we're like in kindergarten for this. so
No,
we're
this
trying
is
to
good.
refresh.
So
You put in a ring, and then you tie in smaller towers and microwaves or what have you around that ring? Or how's it work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, on I guess on the video, and I think, let me see what place. When we started to look at this, over in the city of Mason, there was already a real nice data center that was located there that you could potentially, again, we start to define the scope and figure this out. You could tie into that, utilize that data center, and that's where somebody, if you were a Spectrum or a small internet service provider, you would also go to a data center where you would, that's kind of like the faucet that turns on. And then you create a ring, or you create, let's say you don't have the monies to create an entire ring, but you create some form of an infrastructure that eventually could become a gigantic ring that connects all the townships and cities and villages within Warren County. But you look at define the county assets that you say, hey, we really want to make sure that we connect these specific assets, and you call it a mini ring. Again, not forgetting that you may want to expand in the future. And then within that ring that you form, or that fiber infrastructure, then you look and you can put in, like you mentioned, towers. You could say, hey, this community, it's hard to put, we don't have enough money to put infrastructure in to feed this area. But we know we need to do better there. And so you then could put a tower, or you could use existing infrastructure to mount antennas and radio frequency devices to be able to shoot signals. Or you could also, again, if you get the infrastructure to an area, you try to find strategic partners that would want to invest the money into those areas.
But, so, for instance, I think we get the concept of the ring, and if you're close to the ring, that's fantastic, because you can
Perfect.
tie directly into it or what have you. If you're in southeastern Warren County in Harlan Township, you're still a long way away from the ring. So how is that, just theoretically, how's that?
So you would have,
expand?
imagine a spoke, you would have a leg coming off of the ring that would go feed off to a general region. And at that point, you could tie off of that with fiber, or you could also deploy infrastructure like a tower and create a network through, LTE type.
And when you're saying they, is that defined as the private sector, or is that the public sector
So that-
would be doing that? Because obviously in southern Harlan Township, who's exactly who we're charged with trying to provide service for.
Okay.
There might be 5 homes in a 5-mile radius, and the loop is, you know, 7 miles away.
Yeah.
You know, how are we getting it down to that's the question.
And so that's, you know, again, we, performing this feasibility study and understanding the specific needs to that area. And I, just so I want to keep talking, I want some of you to meet some of the other team members. But one of the things we need to.
When we ask a lot of questions, we give more time.
No,
It's
okay,
It's
okay, good. So part of so within that region that you're specifically mentioning, we want to do a feasibility study to better understand what those folks need in that area, from what are their bandwidth needs, and what type of new development and what type of things are happening in that area. And then then you better to understand what type of infrastructure is needed to be able to service those people. And maybe you say, there's a couple homes there, and they really don't need a whole lot, and we can get away with putting in an LTE radio type system that transmits a signal to those homes, and 300 megabits or 500 megabits is sufficient for them. But it may be that there's some businesses over there, and a more robust infrastructure needs to be put in to better serve that area. So it really, I'll introduce Ben McKeeman. If you would share what we did with, for example, the Cuyahoga Falls or Talmadge, to better understand, you know, as we laid out fiber, how we best determined, you know, what type of infrastructure had to get to an area.
Right. Good morning, my name is Ben McKeeman.
Can you
I'm a
come to the
GIS
mic,
specialist.
please?
Hi, good morning. My name is Ben McKeeman. I'm a GIS specialist. I handle a lot of the market analytics and fiber market research that goes into these initial planning studies to really understand what areas of the county, or in other cases, cities we've worked with, to understand, is it a business challenge that we're facing? Is it an underserved area? I know a lot of areas of the county, you're at double-digit adoption rates for fiber service for residents already, which is pretty high for the state of Ohio. And really understanding where the business challenges are. We know there's a huge diversity in terms of land use across the county, so perhaps the southwestern portion of the county has a lot of great infrastructure and has a lot of bandwidth for businesses. How do we extend that, perhaps with a ring, to provide that additional service to other areas of the county? So a lot of the market analytics will focus on what areas, what townships, what villages are really poised to benefit from increased bandwidth, whether it's through LTE technology, whether it's through a full ring extension, things like that. But really have to understand what the needs are from the outset to how to better serve business and residential needs in certain areas.
It's a great question. Again, we know you have allocated $5 million initially for this, and so part of this would be, when the scope went out, there's a very broad scope, and we need to dial in exactly what you need to accomplish, and at least on the offset, we really need to see those assets that you want to connect. And again, I don't want to lose sight of a bigger project and a bigger picture for the future. And so that's where we took the time to outline that larger ring to give you an idea of cost and what it costs to put in high-speed fiber infrastructure.
Should we be telling you all what's important for us to connect, or should you guys be doing an assessment and telling us this is how you can get the biggest bang for your buck?
So we will, it's a great question. And you may have certain goals that you want to accomplish, and that's where a scoping meeting would take place, and you would tell us specifically what your goals are. But with our feasibility study and our needs assessments, we would say that we have outlined these areas specifically need to have better connectivity. And these are opportunities here to increase connectivity, and here's opportunity areas, and then we would also, so it would be a combination of us working together on that.
And so you're for this proposal, you're really looking at about a 6-month time frame to do the scoping, then the asset identification, your community engagement piece, and then putting forward something for our consideration.
So, correct. And so we tried to outline what a typical project would look like. You mentioned there that outreach piece, and that's where it mentioned in the video, creating that brand and that communication piece. And I wanted to introduce to you Ariel on our team. Ariel, do you want to come up and introduce yourself? If you would just share with them what we've done in the past and what we could do for them to have set up that communication arm.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Ariel Stuff, and I will be providing the public outreach for this project. And in the past, we've seen a lot of success with building a robust brand as well as a robust communication plan for this. So everybody's on board. You know, there's a fluid information engagement. And this is also, the first part of this will be information gathering. So we send out a survey. We try to understand where the community falls in terms of their current technology that they have. And then from there, we go and we have meetings with these different constituents in the community. So we can explain what we're doing, answer questions, and kind of use those questions to build a hub of information like we talked about in the, on the video. So that is a website, and we've seen a lot of success with a website to kind of have a resource internally for you guys as well as externally, so everybody is on the same page of what's going on. This also builds confidence with what you're doing throughout the community, so there's a high adoption rate of everybody getting on board, your public, your private entities, your residents, anybody that you identify that's going to be impacted by this project. And then it also builds excitement, so different service and providers want to be a part of this project. So this community outreach piece is very important. We've seen a lot of success in building this out. Do you have any questions about community outreach?
And Ariel pointed out there is that this is really, the beginning of a business plan. And you're looking, and depending on how you pose, and does the county want to be a ISP? Do you want to be your own internet service provider? Or are you putting in infrastructure to court someone else to run something for you? And so a lot of those questions are things to be worked out. But if you are wanting to be your own ISP, or maybe let's say you do want to create infrastructure for someone else to run, that messaging and to court private groups or other monies to be put into this project, being able to show the needs, incumbent providers are lacking in this area. So we've studied and we know they're not doing a good job here. Or maybe they are doing a good job here and this is what's happening. Or the people are saying they're happy with what they have, or maybe they're really dissatisfied. And so that's all the information that goes on to create these models to help us make good business decisions.
So are you all just literally developing the study and doing the model of where it's most efficient or where the greatest need is or something like that, and then we're engaging with the private sector to go build this? It's not you guys, or are you guys literally building this?
So
Can I take that, Dave?
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
So that's part of the reason why, we're here today, to basically understand how this came about, why this RFP was put on the street, what was the initial thought process. There's two ways or multiple ways to move this project forward. The excitement piece, the marketing and the brand will help you attract a partner to ultimately run this system for you. Or it will ultimately attract a business partner such as maybe the county who wants to run it themselves, similar to how they run their water department and wastewater department, to attract adoption rate and make it a feasible project that is engaged by all. So really, we'd like to learn more on your end of what the end goal was, and we can also speak to you in the feasibility study based on the feedback we get from businesses and residents with our outreach program, to understand an estimate of what the adoption rate would be, so that we can then calculate and put that into our model, our business model, and basically see what project would be more suitable. You have half the battle already. You have a utility already built into the county that has a billing system that has contact with everybody in the county, most folks in the county. So you're halfway there with that back office piece. So we can look at that return on investment both avenues. It all depends.
Generally incredibly limited government, and honestly, I don't know that we want to be in that business when the private sector is already doing it. We don't like competing with the private sector. Private sector 10 times out of 10 does things better than government does it for the most part when it comes into the, most things. But if we view this as somewhat of a public utility, which there's a legitimate argument for making that, then there is a role for government. But again, if the private sector can manage and run it, then at least from my perspective, I like that better.
Yeah, that's a way of building this business model.
So essentially, you guys are doing this, you're doing the mapping, you're doing this, and then you go in and say, okay, you've got the plan, we've helped you identify what you want or should be thinking about, and then we go out and talk to a Spectrum or whoever, and they come in and dig the lines and put it all in and things like that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I will tell you from history and experience, my experience is you'll get the incumbent providers pushing back, quite honestly. They typically do not like to partner. You can get another private entity to come in, a separate ISP, to actually build it for you and run it and maintain and operate it for you. But the incumbent providers are, for some reason, I sat in several meetings with other municipalities, other state governmental agencies, county agencies, asked them to come in and ask them, say, basically, the municipality was willing to build the infrastructure for them and then lease it to them to supply a better, faster service to their business and residences. And they basically said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We're good the way we are. I'm not saying that'll be the case here in your community, but I've been in about 5 of those meetings, and that's basically how the meeting went.
Yeah, the head of Spectrum has reached out to me a couple of times saying, we've got all these dollars also, we'd love to be in the middle of this discussion.
Oh, great, great. So there's a relationship there already. That's great.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, I think we don't know what a lot of information. And from my standpoint, I view this as an opportunity for us to learn what is actually happening in all areas of our county, both business and residents, and kind of what the future is going to look like. So how we position ourselves for the strongest possible economic, to be competitive in the future and have workforce here to be able to support that economic activity. And so, to me, the community engagement piece is super interesting because I can certainly speak from my personal experience, and I can speak anecdotally about what I think or what I hear, but I'm super curious to understand businesses that exist here, what are they saying their needs are, and are they getting their needs met from the municipal corporations and the villages and townships? Are they getting what they need? To me, to hear from the stakeholders so that we can make a more informed decision about what, if any, investment may be made by this county. I don't know that I'm personally prepared to say it's appropriate for us to engage in a build out, or I'm more like Dave here, where it would be a really high bar to overcome to say we want to be an ISP. I can't imagine us doing that, though. I am trying to hold judgment to see what the community says, what the data tells us, what the proposal is. So from my standpoint, what I don't know is what the community is saying about it, and we need to understand that. And what I don't know is where the future is going to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when all of these other communities are doing this stuff. How do we ensure that this community is a part of that? I mean, this state is investing billions of dollars in this and not necessarily in this county. And so how do we keep from being not on the leading edge, left behind, if you will? Like, to me, that's what I want to know. I'm going to forego the whole Ring or Spoke or ISP or partnership or whatever conversation. What I think is, I'd really like to know, this is what this community needs, and this is how you can get it done, and then have the conversation about whether or not we participate in that, or if we think that incumbent providers are gonna be able to get us there. While all the while, the investment is going in other places, because communities all around this state and the state itself are stepping up in big ways.
Shannon, if I may, with the public outreach, if I can go there, but, that's why we kind of start from the beginning with the survey, and we kind of try to understand where your community is at to kind of lay the groundwork before we go into these individual meetings with the different entities. So we kind of take that and we say, okay, here's where they are with their technology, here's where they are with their comfortability of this project, kind of here's where we're going into this meeting. Then we have these meetings, and that's a second informational gathering of where everybody is on board with this project. And then we use that meeting to generate frequently asked questions to kind of gauge what questions do they want to know, what can we help with, what is misunderstood, so there's a solid communications plan, a solid branding, so we can get all the constituents on the same page at the beginning. And that's this is going to be an informational gathering, that's going to be the first step of this, is understanding your community. We're coming in here to try to understand what you guys need and what your community needs, and we're here to help with that, and that's something that we've been very successful with.
Well, you've gotten, obviously, everybody's gotten the same request for proposal that you've made a written response to, and which is detailed, I'm sure. So, can you give me a reason why, and there's three different, I guess we can disclose other people that obviously have provided us with responses to this. Why should we choose you to do this report and this analysis for us?
Sure.
As opposed to any other group that is doing it, is making it?
I'll let Dave take that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We've done this before. As Frank outlined at the beginning, when Fairlawn Gigs started, we were there at the grassroots when they decided, hey, should we form an ISP and begin looking at how do we serve the businesses and residents in our area. And Environmental Design Group has the history and the experience, but also we have the plan specifically for Warren County. We have demonstrated through our response and through the information that we've laid out here that we have a plan in place for you. We have a plan to go out and get the information, do the information gathering, understand the existing infrastructure that's there, really know, can we utilize existing assets, or do we have to, where can we take advantage of things? We have a plan to gather that information, and we have a plan for the latest technology to utilize for Warren County. We have a plan to utilize your money the best way. We know how to best take that money that you've allocated for this and get the biggest bang for the buck. And we will be able to also, at the same time, do that while not losing track of the overarching vision of the future. Shannon, you mentioned that, you don't want to get left behind. We don't want Warren County to get left behind. And we want to make sure that, right now, you have a bunch of incumbent providers that are giving service through copper and coax, and that's the way that data gets transferred to people right now, through television and through phone lines, and it does an okay job with communicating internet, but it's not the best. And when you put an infrastructure in, like a fiber network, fiber ring, that's gonna get so that you don't get left behind, because no matter what, if you put that infrastructure in, you can go to the incumbent providers and say, guess what? You guys didn't want to put that money and invest in our area, but we invested in ourselves. So now come on in here, we got the dang ring here, and tie into this ring and service our people. Or if we got businesses here, we want to develop this area. We have fiber here now, and you can develop it. And so we got a plan in place. So we didn't come in here to sit here and talk about, why I'm the best. We came in here to share with you that we have a plan, and we can get you where you need to go.
So you say you have done this kind of study and report for other communities?
Absolutely.
What other communities have you done that for? Are you able to tell us that?
We've done it for the city of Cuyahoga Falls. We've done a study for city of Talmadge. We did the study for the city of Fairlawn, and we helped Summit County develop a fiber ring to connect all of their judicial fiber, judicial buildings, I would say, and we studied that route. It wasn't necessarily a feasibility study.
Do you know of any other county in Ohio that has performed this type of study and sought a report like this?
So Summit County is the only other county.
That was just for judicial services?
No, well, it was for some county assets, and they're taking that smaller ring, and now Summit County has 125 miles that they're building, and we're actually doing the job hubs and opportunity zone study, very similar to what you're trying to accomplish right now for Summit County right now. So we designed the criteria documents for the fiber ring, and we also went out there and made sure that backhoes weren't hitting things and made sure it was laid out right. We also told them how to connect their assets efficiently so that they had redundancy in their ring. But then we also took that plan, and they're expanding off of that with now looking at LTE opportunities for some low-income areas and things within the community. But we're also now looking at that 125-mile ring that's going on, and we're incorporating that judicial ring into the larger ring. And so we've done exactly what you're trying to accomplish, all facets of it. It was a great question.
All right, well, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll be looking at all the data that you've provided to us.
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to leave behind video brochures for you to watch the video at your own leisure again as well.
Thank
so
you.
much.
But I'm taking my fiber. Anyone else want to see it? Didn't get a chance.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Don't open it.
That's very cute.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Notepad sitting around. Someone said. All right.
Morning.
Morning.
Last firm is from Morley, so I will pass out their proposal here, their presentation.
Are you ready? All right, good morning. My name is Jeremy Elrod. I'm with Morley. I'm on the first page, I guess, section 1 of ours. I'm the name at the bottom, so in case you forget my name, because I'm not good with names either. Excited to be here. Appreciate the kind of make the short list, give you guys a presentation. I want to start in on our proposal, talk about who we are, what we do, what we've done, and then, because I think that lines up pretty well with the RFQ on the evaluation criteria, and then also talk a little bit about the specific scope of work and what we put in our proposal and how to tackle that. So who are we? Morley, we are, don't know if this will shock anyone, we're not an IT consultant, we're not an IT company. Our background, we're architects, engineers, and surveyors. We're founded as an engineering and survey company in 1976. And so we're built on, again, engineers, surveyors, and architects. That sometimes surprises folks, sometimes doesn't. A little pride speaking here, but something I like to share is that ASCE, if you've heard of them, American Society of Civil Engineers, they put out an annual report card. It's the infrastructure report card, if you heard of it. It's the one where we get to hear about our bridges getting a D- for the year, and everything needs improved. And so when we think of infrastructure in that sense, we think of civil engineers. In their latest report card, they didn't give a grade to broadband, but I think we'd all agree that broadband, I mean, we would consider it a essential need in today's world. And so they did do a spotlight. They called it a spotlight on broadband. I assume in future reports, they will assess a score, so to speak. And so even a society as large as ASCE, a national society, well, really a global society, you know, they are emphasizing the need for not only broadband as being looked at as infrastructure, but civil engineers kind of leading that front. Because obviously civil engineers are involved with, you know, public water, sewer, wastewater, clean water, bridges, roads, those kinds of things. So again, that's kind of who we are. I like to share that bit to kind of show the correlation. And it goes beyond that, and I'll talk a little bit more about our experience as engineers and how we believe it's helpful to a broadband project. And this is, again, walking through our proposal for our key personnel. Jim Morley Jr., who's the president of our company, he was unable to be here today, so you got the pretty face instead. That would be me. I'm the engineering manager at Morley, but Jim Morley, he's obviously there in more the kind of the government relations, you know, principal in charge of a project. He's got 20-plus years of really community development. We've long worked for, so our home county is Warwick County out of Newburgh, Indiana, southwestern Indiana. We have been the local economic development engineering consultant for 20-plus years, to which Jim Morley sat on that council. And so we've seen, you know, that county grow. They're one of the top growing counties in Indiana, and we like to believe we're a part of that. And so with that economic development alone, we've been on a wide array of projects, you know, everything from, you know, it used to be, you know, driving economic development was, industrial parks, those kinds of things. That's, you know, switched to more healthcare, quality of life. So we've done that. That is where we got our start with broadband high-speed internet, fiber optic to be specific. In about 2016, they headed off a venture for economic development to bring a fiber backbone loop to Warwick County, our home county, and that was to keep up with quality of life, economic development, those sorts of things. As their engineering council, we forefronted that endeavor, which ultimately led to a 115-mile fiber optic loop, a 10-gigabyte loop through the medical industry. We have a medical hub in that county, and it was a 2-year build-out, which finished up right at the beginning of COVID in about 2020. And so we were there, and I'll talk more maybe about that here in a little bit. But so that's kind of where we got our start. Again, the engineering manager, so I deal more with these kinds of things, contract negotiations. We prepare RFPs for the providers for counties and communities. So I do more of the kind of in the weeds, the contract work, and just overall contract and project management.
So when you guys did it in Vandenberg County?
Yes, sir.
You're saying that reached 97% of the area in a rural county, sounds like?
Yeah, and so the project I just described was Warwick County, which was the adjoining county, but in Vandenberg County, which is our neighbor county, they brought us on, I would say largely because of our success and guidance in Warwick County, and we recently just kicked off a project that will service, it's about 97% of the geographic area of unincorporated Vandenberg County.
And that's about $40 million project?
Yes, sir.
Was that all public dollars, or?
So it's a $39.6 million total bill, 9.9 million of which is the county contribution, which is ARP funded.
So was that just where you guys were involved with that and did an assessment of where's the best place to put it or what have you, and then they did what, like a fiber loop around the county, and then the private sector paid for a lot of it?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because and I was going to get more towards the end. Not that, so we were fully capable of doing the scope of work that was outlined. To talk specifically about Vandenberg County, what we've, just be frank and honest, what we've seen in other communities is a lot less study and feasibility up front. And so the Vandenberg County project, we wrote that RFP. We collected the proposals, we evaluated and scored the proposals. We made recommendations to the county commissioners. Ultimately, we helped select AT&T, who's that provider, and then we also drafted that contract and performed the contract negotiations. But to answer your question, as opposed to what's in this SOQ, what you guys are looking for from a consultant, they did very little of, whether it's right or wrong. And
Yeah, that's right. So there's a different model than
Yes.
as opposed, and this is what you have expertise in.
Yes.
Instead of us doing this study and going out and trying to
Sure.
say, here's one firm, we're identifying this, you're saying an engineering company can just write us an RFP, take it out to internet service providers, the Spectrums, the AT&T, or whoever, and say, we have some matching local dollars, please build us a countywide fiber network?
Yeah, so we could do that. We do it, actually, I'd say a little bit of a hybrid. So as with any successful project, there's obviously due diligence, which is a lot of this falls under that. And so we don't just go in blind and say, hey, we got $5 million, who wants to take it? But we don't. So in Warwick County, the first project we did, that's exactly what we did. We went, did study feasibility, we found anchor institutions, we had a fiber backbone, we said this is exactly where we want it. Here's how much money we got, we actually didn't specify money, but we said we're gonna put in public funding, give us your proposals. We got 2 proposals, one matched what we put out for. One was a wireless company that tried to come in, maybe kind of like what I'm doing, and tell you to do something different. So they came in with a completely, so effectively we got one proposal that met our plan, which it turned out to be a great project, a successful project. Vandenberg County, so the world's kind of changed, especially with a lot of the public funding, the ARP funding, the need for broadband. There's a lot more players in the game. The reason I think when we got one proposal, every other major provider in the area, again, this was pre-COVID, more or less they blew us off. They said, oh, great, you're public funding, we're, not AT&T, it was all of them, but AT&T say, hey, we're AT&T, we do our own thing. It wasn't until that project was under design by the provider, we had one major local provider come back and say, oh, wait, we have fiber in that area. And I was like, well, it's too late, you didn't tell us that. And so that was a bit of the challenge I saw in some of this SOQ is some of that existing infrastructure. In our experience, it's very hard to pry that out of them. But in Vandenberg County, what we've done since the world's kind of changed with broadband and ARP and COVID, is we've really, because again, it's a public-private partnership, the public has a need, obviously. You guys want to put in money. The private side of it, they're in it to make money. And so the way we structured that one was to basically have each provider put their best foot forward and give us the most effective proposal to service as many customers in the county. And we came back, to be honest, we hit a home run. AT&T came back and said, for this amount of money, we can cover essentially everyone in the county. And we kicked in $9 million, which they had $12 million to kick in, and it turned out to be an awesome project. But in that, we also had 3 other proposals for little pieces because AT&T is obviously a large provider. We had a smaller company say, well, we have infrastructure here. We see our project and build out being here. We can hit 6,000 homes, and we can do it if you give us $1.1 million. So obviously there's 9.6 to cover the whole county, which was kind of a no-brainer because they had allotted that much money. Or we had 1.6 to hit this chunk. I think another one was like 3.5 to hit another chunk. And so I believe, personally, the success of that RFP we put out was that we had a variety of solutions, and it allowed the county and us to analyze the proposals and see what's the best impact on the county, what's the best allocation of public funds. And the truth is, you don't have to pick one of those. You can pick multiple projects through an RFP. You can go into contract with multiple providers. If provider A has infrastructure in the northern part of the county and you tell them to go to the southwestern part, it could be a challenge for them. But if another provider's right here, it's a lot more effective, cost efficient, less county contribution for them to cover that area. And
So, yeah, other folks have been telling us just how a lot of the incumbent legacy providers are very anti this process. They don't like this process. And you're kind of saying that might be true, but it's also true that they want to be a player in this process.
Yeah, the tables have turned. Like I said, in 2016, when we first did it, we had every major provider essentially blow us off, for lack of better terms. They're all ears perked now, but the stakes are a bit higher. There's a lot more money out there. If they don't grab it, their competition grabs it. And so, I mean, it's private industry. Most of our history is in private development, and so
Which is why my ears are perking up, because I know someone at one of the major providers, and they've said 10 times, we want to talk to Warren County about this, but then the other folks are kind of saying, no, we need to do it this way, don't, the big providers won't do this. And you're saying the big providers have done this in Indiana.
Yes, yeah. I will say every post-COVID project we've done, the big providers have shown interest in.
But of course, and you're not suggesting that you would be, I mean, obviously, we're asking for an analysis and a report from you. You've seen the request for proposal, which you've obviously responded to in writing in detail, and we'll look at that. But and that's really what we're going to be basing decisions on with regard to going forward with the study and the report.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're not seeking to be the firm that would actually do the work at the end of the day. You are suggesting that we might go out, like you've done in these 3 Indiana counties, to other providers and to get requests from them in response to your report that will identify the needs of our county and recommendations that you'll give us to see whether current incumbents would be willing to then go out and meet those needs with private funding as well as maybe some.
Yes. Yeah, in a nutshell, I believe that is, that almost hits the nail on the head. One of the questions I had for you all was going to be kind of the ultimate goal of the final report, only because, so what we would do is we would do similar steps here, maybe not to this detail, but at the end, what you guys are calling a final report, we would craft that into an RFP, a request for proposals. That would be a public bid process. All your major providers would have opportunity to put into. You, like I said, you obviously don't go in blind. You say, hey, we have needs in this area. We have underserved communities here. We have, economic growth we want to see here. We have anchor institutions, and we lay that all out. And they come back and, like I said, they put their best foot forward and say, well, we have infrastructure in these places, or, maybe someone big comes in and says, we can knock out the whole county or a portion of the county. Now, obviously, I think you guys had listed in the SOQ about $5 million, so that's going to gauge the scale of their project. If you tell them the county's only interested in contributing, say $5 million. But that's effectively, that's what we do for other communities. We've seen success from it, and that's what I guess that's what I was here to talk about. We are capable of doing what's on here, kind of to the T, so to speak, but I did want to have the opportunity to kind of discuss what we've done for other communities and just kind of see how you guys thought about that and go through that Q&A as well.
In Morley County, when you say there's nearly 100 miles of backbone fiber optic cable, are you talking like a fiber ring or something like that?
In Warwick County, yes, yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, Posey. Yeah, Posey County. So this was a provider actually came in and did the actual digging, they put in the actual fiber, and
yes,
that entire 100 miles was only 6.2 million? Or that was the local contribution to that project?
For Posey County, that was total project cost. Posey County, the county only had 1.1 million in that. Now, that contract, they also, they got creative. So Indiana has a Next Level Connections. You may have heard of it. It's a state grant. So the states kicked in about 1-ish million. The county kicked in 1.1 million, and the provider basically did a match of those to get up to about, 6 million. So there's some creative approaches. I mean, RDOF is a federal, so there's a lot of money out there for grabs. And some of the challenges I saw with the SOQ, which I was going to go through, is one, in our experience, it's hard to get information from the private providers. That's not usually something they like to open the book to, so to speak. The other challenges in here is cost. again, our opinion, it's rather difficult to advise you guys what a project might cost. I can tell you exactly how much fiber we built on these and how much it costs, but again, because of the public-private partnership, we have no clue what their models are, you know, what take rates they're assuming on build-outs, you know, their risk tolerance. Some companies, new startups might be a little more risk tolerant, or, you know, and others may be a little risk adverse. And so all those go into calculating, you know, what it could cost the county or the total build-out, not to mention what other funds they potentially are going for. For example, AT&T is going for funds all across the country. You know, we had Warwick County, that was kind of an emerging provider in that county, that project. They had done work, I think, 3 counties east of us, and so they were a local, I wouldn't even call them a regional provider. So for them, the stakes were different, you know, and so right now I think there's just a lot of money out there, and so like everyone else, you know, they're trying to navigate and see where, you know, how many eggs they're going to put in which baskets. And so my opinion, I think it's going to be hard for any consultant to give you guys you know, shed light on what it could cost for XYZ project. And so that was a challenge I saw in the SOQ that I just wanted to discuss a little bit.
This is a little bit, just looking at the material you've given to us, that I'm a little confused by. So in the Vandenberg County Fiber Construction Project, which is the number 1 project you discuss under subsection 5.
Yep.
Section 7,
Seven.
called 5 relevant projects. You mentioned a $39.6 million, I guess, price for a fiber optic broadband project. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah. That's total build, yeah.
Okay, and then in the Posey County one, are we comparing something that's similar? Because they say a fiber optic broadband project, but it's now $6.2 million. I mean, so why is there, I mean, that must be different.
That
We must be
drastic
doing
price
something
difference?
different there.
Yeah. No, there is something different. So Posey County, there was a 100-mile fiber backbone. Again, because of the state grant, it was census block data. They had specified 100 miles they were going for as part of their grant application. So that project is 100 miles for $6 million. Vandenberg County, number 1, is, last I talked with the county engineer, there's 500+ miles of county roads that they will be covering, essentially every single one with fiber optic cable. And so you're looking at 500+ miles for the $40 million, which is Vandenberg County. The Posey, yes, is just a 100-mile, effectively a loop.
Wow,
for
so
$6 million.
their model is literally running a fiber optic cable in front of everybody's house?
Yes, they are, it's public record. They are contractually obligated to serve every resident within a mapped region that is essentially 97% of the county.
And so that just came as a result of you all working, and so tell me your role and what exactly did you do?
Sure.
Because this is, you know, I thought, man, here's a single guy coming in versus, you know, these big teams of folks
I was
coming
worried.
in.
I was nervous when they walked out.
But
Actually, I'm kind of impressed by
yeah,
that.
but right, it's a totally different approach,
Sure.
and so I want to understand exactly what your firm's role in each one of these projects was.
Yeah, so Vandenberg County, because that's kind of the big project. So
That's like the Cadillac, you're
Yeah,
putting it in front
right,
of everybody.
Right, and so we got, again, we did all the work for the neighboring county, which we do a lot of work in Vandenberg County. We know those commissioners well. They had a local, their grant writer put out an RFP. They called it RFP 1. It was for broadband. It was before ARP was announced. It definitely wasn't a failure. Ultimately, we went under contract for a wireless project, which is number 3, but they did not get good responses to that. The county commissioner, she's our contact in there, Commissioner Cheryl Musgrave, reached out to us and said, hey, we tried this once, but you guys know what you're doing. Come do it for us again. So we really took that RFP. We took some local data they had, some due diligence they had. We met with, they essentially assembled a broadband committee. We worked with that committee, identified the goals, objectives of the RFP. We recrafted that RFP essentially from scratch, put it out public. And for us, again, because we're engineers, we do it just like a construction job. So when you do a road project, you have a pre-bid meeting, you have Q&A, addendums. I mean, so we met with them at the Q&A, held a public meeting just like this, took all the questions, answered the questions, collected the proposals, reviewed them. We scored them based on criteria, much like you guys have in yours. And then ultimately, we came forward with a recommendation to the county. They chose AT&T. Like I said, they were a clear home run. And then from there, we helped negotiate the contract on the county's behalf and get under contract. And that project's about, we went under contract in November, so they're about 3 months.
Do you know how much, out of the 40 million and serving literally every house, how much was the public's contribution to that? Do you know?
It was 9.9 million. It was about a 25% match.
Wow.
Is there a reason why, I mean, the three counties that you mentioned are all in the far southwest corner of Indiana. And I'm not familiar with this part of Indiana, but it doesn't have any major cities there.
Evansville, Indiana's
Oh, Evansville,
third
Indiana's
largest
that
city in
area?
Indiana. Yeah.
Which one is that?
That's Vandenberg County. Well, so Vandenberg County is the unincorporated areas, so it's essentially everything but the city of Evansville. City of Evansville pretty well all has gig service, just from development.
How large is the city is Evansville?
The metro area is about 160, 180, 108,000.
108,000?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, that's sizable, but it's not that large. What about Posey and Warwick? Do they have any large cities?
Posey and Warwick would be, they're neighboring to Evansville. Warwick County's 65,000, so a relatively small county. Posey's probably 40,000. So these are smaller counties, yeah.
That surround the major metro.
Yes, yes, yeah,
Evansville.
yeah.
Well, I mean, Evansville is a larger city, but it's not that large. I mean, so why is it that you're involved with these three relatively low population counties?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it all starts with our headquarters is in Newburgh, Indiana, which is Warwick County. We're actually a football throw from the county line, so we're essentially Evansville. And so it all started, like I said, we've been the engineering council for the Warwick County Economic Development for 20-plus years, and we've had a lot of success with them. And so word just kind of gets around. I mean, we value relationships, hard work, and, and doing the best we can, and that kind of organically grows. And so it grew to Vandenberg County, which was the largest metro in our area. It grew to Posey County, which was the next county west. We're currently working in Kentucky with Davis County, and also a few other counties in Indiana.
So would you say these are fairly rural counties, sparsely populated areas?
Other than Vandenberg County, yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's been the challenge with these projects is the low density, cost per mile of fiber to run, which sways costs and those kinds of things.
I think you're going to find in Warren County that there's some similarities to our county with this, because there's large parts of our county that are very rural.
Yeah.
That are very low population, and I believe that we'll probably find that it's in those areas that have much poorer quality service.
Sure, yeah.
In terms of their access to broadband and
Yeah.
fiber optic service. I don't know what we're going to find out there, but my guess is that there's large parts of the Warren County area, particularly in the eastern part of our county,
Yeah.
that are very sparsely populated.
Yeah.
And don't have any major metropolitan areas. I mean,
Right.
obviously, you've got sort of like the western part of our county has areas that are sparsely populated too, but then there is Lebanon, and there's Mason and Deerfield Township, there's Springboro, Carlisle, and Franklin.
Right.
All more densely populated and have larger cities within that territory. And my guess is that when we start going into those territories, that we're going to find that there are incumbent providers that have coverage in those areas.
Right.
While going into the rural areas of our county, we don't have that, or
Sure.
we don't, I think you're going to find that we don't have that as much. So do you think that the kinds of analysis and help that you've done for the three counties you've mentioned is similar in nature to what you're going to find here?
I think, I do think so, at its core. And that is why we like to largely emphasize that if you go through this public RFP process and you get proposals that, you can award multiple contracts, sometimes that's in the county's best interest. You know, the AT&T was a home run, Vanderburgh County, whole county, no brainer. But because of what you just described, I could see, you know, if you got $5 million to hand out, you know, I could see chunks of $1.5 million, $2 million, you know, that have strategically the best, or the, you know, the greatest effect on the ultimate need, which is what essentially getting rural folks, high-speed internet. And that's what, I mean, we've worked in, it seems like we've worked in maybe a little more rural counties. Vanderburgh County had a similar problem. I mean, Evansville, may not seem big to some, but again, it's the third biggest city in Evansville. But Vanderburgh County, people that live 5 miles north of the city, some folks didn't have internet, and the commissioners would get an earful about that. You know, they've gotten it for the last 2 or 3 years. And so it seemed odd to people that there were still rural folks in Vanderburgh County. But the truth is, every county's got rural folks.
Yeah, because it's a little bit more concentrated. It's only 236 square miles and has about 180,000 people in it, 190,000 people.
Yeah.
So it's not crazy dissimilar to us, but
Yeah.
We would be probably more rural than they are because we're big. We're 400 square miles.
Yeah, Vanderburgh
with
County is
230,000.
relatively a smaller geographic area. That's, yeah. Now, Posey, on the other hand, is a little larger, but again, they're running 100 miles based on what a provider put in a
But I'm
proposal.
still interested in the process, because that catches my attention. So, so you went in, you did the assessment, they tried to do it themselves, you guys came in as engineers, say, this is what we do, we write these proposals.
Right.
Did the county then say, we have $9 or $10 million to put towards this process, we're making it a public proposal, they disclosed, hey, we have
Yeah.
$9.5 million or whatever, and then you, private sector, come back and give us the best proposal with your money to serve the most people, and that's where AT&T came in and said, we'll come up with 30 million and we're gonna serve everybody. Is that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
what happened?
effectively, that's what happened. So when we released the RFP, so we were 2 weeks from publication when the ARP interim rule came out, or abouts, and so it kind of train wrecked our process. We were ready to go, and so we had a 2-week crash course to tailor that RFP, because we wanted projects to be ARP eligible for obvious reasons. And so when we put it out, the county knew how much money they were getting, but how much they were allocating to broadband. But in our pre-bid meeting, well, I'll call it, the county did disclose they were willing to entertain up to about $12.5 million is what we told providers in the process. And then we essentially, for lack of a better term, said, put your best foot forward. There's no project too big, too small. So we did. I mean, we got projects that were to serve maybe a couple thousand residents, and then we got the AT&T project. So we had the full spectrum, and we had everything. You know, I think our smallest project asked for, like I said, it was like a $1.5 million contribution, and AT&T asked for $10 million. And so that, we see that as kind of being the beauty of what we did, as opposed to saying, you know, here's the backbone here, and all 6 of you, we need you to quote this. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There may be a provider that's strategically, you know, they're in a position to say, okay, we've got data center here, infrastructure here, whatever it may be, we can make that loop and try to fit it into your budget, so to speak. But I would definitely recommend, whichever route you go, to be, I would say, upfront with the providers on the money, the contribution the county's willing to make, because for obvious reasons that goes into how they craft their proposal and what they can do with it. And so I don't know if that helps give you a little more of that insight of what we did. And so I would also advise you not to overthink it, because that's quite purely what we did in Vanderburgh County. So you could say we got lucky, whatever you want to call it, but so far it's been quite the home run in Indiana.
See, because that's what wasn't adding up, and I was asking the other folks that a little bit. That's what wasn't adding up in my head, because I know for a fact that these internet service providers have, as you said, Shannon, tons and tons of money from them. I mean, there's all sorts of federal money out there. These guys want these projects, and it's like, wait a second, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they competing to do it?
I think that's a really good point. I think that the issue is, and you're sort of highlighting this, is when you do the due diligence, have somebody do the due diligence up front, and you have the community saying, this is what our needs are. And you say, we're willing to put in X amount of money to do this. That's what brings the other players to the table, you know, to be able to say, okay,
Yeah.
you know, we'll get this done. I mean, that to
Because-
me, it's sort of both and. It's like,
And what we've seen is the ARP money, I mean, it's unique in the sense that it came straight to you guys. And so it didn't go to the state, and the state say, you got to check these 6 boxes to get it. For example, in Posey, the Next Level Connections, which is a statewide Indiana grant, it's a great program. It's getting folks internet, but it's got a very strict set of criteria, census block, yada, yada, yada. For good or bad, I mean, ARP has a lot looser requirements. They actually, from the interim rule, I'm sure you guys are aware of the final rules out now, they even got looser.
yeah.
And so it's in our opinion, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for the local county, you know, the county municipality to determine how those funds are spent, and kind of direct the project in that fashion, because some of these projects, for example, Posey County, were a bit restricted from getting, I mean, it's kind of, the further you walk, you know, state, fed, you know, as that money trickles down through grant programs, there's usually more restrictions and less flexibility on it. So ARP has been unique in that sense, which is where we've helped counties kind to navigate that and ultimately use the funds how they see fit, which we identify through, due
The
diligence.
state could also be a player in this, whatever
Oh,
the
for sure,
project is too. I mean, because we have a similar program that's using state ARPA dollars, and they're making investments all over the place.
Yep.
And I think, you know,
Well, there's more money coming too,
I'm really reflecting on your point is to say, you know, you're willing to put, if it's $5 million into this or $4 million into this, it changes the calculus. You know, where others can be, you know, there's other pots of resources to be able to pull into it, making some incumbent providers or maybe some new companies that want some new entrance into the marketplace, make it more attractive on the front end.
Now
That's how you get the cooperation and interest of
The trick, of course, is timing. Like if you're familiar with RDOF, you know, that timeframe's a lot further out there than people sometimes realize, but, you know, and so it creates complexities. Like with ARP, you know, they discourage overlapping zones, but, you know, with ARP, they really want us to get there in 2 years, but RDOF, they may have 6 or 8 years. So there are challenges when you pull money from different pools, as always. And so and part of what the SOQ, the report in 100 days, I was going to talk about, so in the interim rule, like I said, it was, the way we interpreted it was less flexible. It said you had to have essentially your money spent by into 2024, but you had till 2026 to do your project, which we're here in February 2022, and you guys wanted a report in essentially 150 days, so now you're 4 or 5 months more in, so you got less time to hold on to your money, so to speak. But that's changed. The final rule came out, and you don't have to spend the money till into 2026. Because what we're advising counties is that and you guys probably understand this more than anyone, it's one thing to cut the check 2024 and say, all right, get your project done 2026. Sometimes construction doesn't work that way. I mean, you wouldn't pay all the money up front for a bridge, you know, when it's not supposed to be done for 2 years. And so that changed a little bit.
If we got a 40% discount, we might.
Fair enough. But the point being that you know, the timing of these things is a bit critical. I was going to bring that up, but like I said, with kind of the relaxation of the final rule, I think it's a non-issue if you guys still go the route you go.
So again, I'm trying to focus on Morley's role in the process.
Yep.
So there's one thing to be specific, because obviously you guys, even though you're engineer, you know, more like civil engineers,
Yep.
it sounds like, you know this area, and you can write these RFPs or what have you.
Yep.
But do you also, as part of your process, then help us identify what areas are most underserved or what areas most need it? Or is that even, and Paul, that's a question for you too, is that something we even really need? Because again, it's 99.72% is served by 3, but in reality, it's not. So do we even need to tell someone, to do a study to tell us, because the FCC's already told us, haven't they?
Well, I think if you put it in your bid specs, you bid this, like he's saying, you know, put it out for bid and say you've got to cover this area, then you're.
But I want to make sure we're telling them the right area. I don't, wanting to make sure that, obviously Franklin, Springboro, some of these areas have clear deficiencies, and we all know Harlan Township, no one's doing a 4-person Zoom call in Harlan Township.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not. So, I don't know if anybody wants to either, but.
I think if you ask anybody, ask me, I want faster internet, I want it cheaper, and I want it now. I think that's going to be universal across the county. I've got halfway decent internet, I can't complain, but there's some people that have none. And I think, if we can elevate everybody, get the cost down, and get a good package, I think as part of your bid specifications, you include public Wi-Fi in parks or places that you want it. You include in our bid specifications that we connect our towers and we connect our public buildings with dedicated bandwidth. And I think you put all that into a package and put it out to bid, and I think you'll get what you want.
And so a couple things on that. I heard you mention 25.3, so I just want to make y'all aware. So the final rule came back and relaxed that. Underserved now defined as 100/20 for ARP, which is a good thing for these projects and meeting eligibility. We have seen some creative approaches, I'll say, to identifying unserved, underserved. No one, I mean, you kind of use you're picking and choosing what piece of information you like, so to speak, but I mean, I think it's a general consensus that no one trusts the FCC maps. At least that we've heard that from Munford County we've worked in. Vandenberg County actually did, this was one part, the grant writer, they were a local economic development coalition, assisted. They actually just basically put out a survey. They had, I think, 600 responses to it, which might not sound like much for a large metro area, but it helped us identify basically the hubs of, I mean, because you only need one person on a street to tell you they don't have internet. You don't need every person on the street to tell you they don't have internet. And so that allowed us to identify it. We supplied that information during the RFP to the providers. Now, ultimately, how we crafted the contracts in the RFP is we put a lot of that burden on the provider, is say, hey, when you want to build out, you got, I mean, the rules of ARP, our RFP states it, it's clear. Y'all show, here's what we know, here's what we found, but we expect you to put some skin in that too.
So we just give them criteria. Anybody that has less than blank, you do this.
Yeah. And of course, when you
want them served, we're not figuring out who they are.
Right.
Because when I asked the question, Paul, I want to be clear. Do we need someone to come in and do a study to tell us who needs to be served? Or do we kind of know that?
I think we have an idea, but as you just said, if you say, 500 meg is we want everybody to have at least 500 meg of internet, then, you set that across the board, and then that covers those people that have 0.
But why wouldn't we want to understand what the industry that's locating here, what their needs are today and will in the future? I mean, I hear that on the residential side, but like the entire workforce is even changing. I mean, maybe in Harlan Township, there's not a lot of 4-person Zoom calls today, but with work from home, with people who want to live in rural communities and be able to carry on their professional work from home, the whole notion of work is changing, and access to this is a critical component of it.
100% agree. What I think our focus is the folks that the residential taxpayers that don't have high-speed internet right now. We want to solve them. If there is some sort of a fiber loop or whatever it is that ultimately is built for that potential industry that comes in, that's on them to tie into it, because there's going to be they're running their own T1 line off of that, aren't they? I mean, eventually, if the fiber's out there, I mean, that's for that business And then it just makes it a heck of a lot easier.
I would say, I mean, if you guys are wholly funding your project on ARP funds, I'd be surprised you get any proposals that aren't a fiber product. I know I saw towers in here, that kind of thing. With some of the eligibility requirements of ARP, it makes it, so far we haven't heard a provider tell us it's possible to, quote, scale to 100 by 100 with a wireless solution. Now, will that technology be here in 5 years? Maybe it will. You know, we probably won't be driving cars in 5 years. And so, but I would think that when you guys do a project, it will be a fiber project. And as far as identifying who's the need and who gets served, going back to the beginning of my presentation with costs and a lot of other variables and factors, is the provider's going to tell you that. You know, and that would be.
Or the people who are getting the service are gonna tell us what they need.
Sure,
I mean,
yeah. I mean,
that's to me where
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I mean, we're gonna decide when I'm not disputing anything you're saying, I appreciate your insight. It's been super helpful to the conversation, but I am, I guess, directed more to Paul, is like, yeah, we could cast this really wide net and say, yeah, we think this will do it, or we could, you know, spend a small amount of money to really understand what we think our needs are, you know, what people are telling us their needs are.
No, and I 100% agree. The SOQ you guys put out, to me, is not all or nothing. Please don't hear it as that. There is a large chunk of this that every county needs to do as part of due diligence for an RFP, you know, for certain counties. Some counties decide to do more, some counties decide to do less. And that's just kind of, you know, your guys' position on it. But a lot of that, was it Paul? Paul had mentioned, is setting criteria in the RFP. And so.
After you do the study to say, here's what our community actually needs.
But you have certain rules.
Again, I'm like in kindergarten with this stuff. What I think most of the community would say is, I want Netflix to stream at night, and I want to be able to do Zoom calls or whatever. I mean, is it 200 megs versus 100?
But what you're going to say as a county is, assuming this is true, if it's not, please correct me, is we want to fund this with American Rescue Plan dollars. So your criteria are, we want to hit as many people who don't have 100/20, and we want to give them 100/100 or more.
And that's where you're saying there are just these standards.
I mean, you have to meet that to be ARPA eligible. And so, I mean, we can write the RFP right now. That's your minimum requirement. There are a few other things in there. So if you guys are about it, the final rule, they laid out a low income. They have to participate in a low income subsidy, which is great. But essentially, those are your three criteria. You know, they have to target unserved, underserved that are less than 100/20. They have to provide 100/100. And they have to be eligible for low-income subsidies.
Yeah, with fiber, the fiber is future-proof, so it can meet your needs today, and it'll be able to meet your needs in the future. So as more and more things become online and your bandwidth needs grow, you're able to take the fiber from a gigabit to the house to 10 gigabit or steps in between. So building fiber now will solve your problems. The LTE solution that was talked about, I mean, that's a cellular type solution. We're switching to the 5th generation of cellular technology now. That stuff, you know, you build it times out, you throw it away, you build new. Fiber, at least you can put new equipment on the ends of the fiber and transmit the data faster. That happens all the time. And so by building fiber to the neighborhoods and to all the businesses, you've essentially got that pipe that can be adjusted and increased as it's needed to address the future needs.
I actually, as little as I know, that's why I was asking about, so are you depending on towers to transmit?
Yeah, towers is a desperate last move to get to that person that's really out there in a river valley that you know, he's just that one guy. But to do it all, fiber will give him what he needs from now on. He shouldn't have to have any other technology other than to change the box on the end of his fiber every 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, as part of, again, if you want to do an ARP project, fund it with ARP dollars, we will have to get creative with, in conjunction with whichever providers and assets that are out there to do a LTE, a tower, wireless internet solution. I don't know if you'll hit that criteria. Now, if you have other means of funding it, so Vandenberg County has a wireless project going on. They are still trying to get it rolled into ARP eligible, but we set I mean, they're contractually obligated to provide the 100 by 20, which is the underserved limit. Whether it'll become scalable, that's what we're tinkering with now, but they funded it with local economic development dollars. It was a much smaller project. I think it was a $500,000 county contribution. And so it's not to say that project's not capable, but if you want to spend up to $5 million of your ARP funding, it will 98% chance probably be a fiber project.
But who's going to help us? Because again, we have other funds available potentially.
Sure.
That if we, you know, because we're always, if we're going to do it, might as well do it right.
Yep.
That there's ARPA dollars, but then there's also, we could make a contribution
Sure.
if it doesn't work. But I'm still struggling with who's going to help us identify, wait, for this amount, you can get blank, but for a little bit more money, you can get blank, which is incrementally better.
So that's where I'll go back to my earlier comment. From the consultant side, I don't know there's a consultant that can tell you that. The only person that can tell you that is your provider. And that's part of that RFP process.
So we can leave that open-ended, even in there,
Yes.
that here's our minimum amount of money, we can do this, but as a secondary, to
Yeah.
serve 99% of our people with fiber,
Right.
what would it cost?
Yeah, so for Vandenberg County, and again, this is all how we craft it and how we form it. It's not I mean, Shannon used the word, I mean, we cast a broad net, but we opened it up to, we specifically said we want projects to be ARP eligible. We outlined that criteria because that's the ultimate goal because the county had $12 million. However, because there are some wireless companies, I mean, we're under contract with one now. There were some other potential solutions that we gave them within the RFP, gave them the ability to submit alternate proposals. We had a provider submit alternate, multiple proposals. And so it's all about, because again, to be honest, I don't know how much it's going to cost to put up 3 new towers in the county and serve these 1,000 customers over here. I have no clue. But whoever tower company or provider you have here probably can give you a
American
clue.
Tower would, right?
Sure.
Okay. Well, we have any more questions?
No, I don't have any more questions, and.
So I don't know if I'd answered all your questions but again, we were excited to
You
be
gave
here.
us something seriously different to think about, so.
Yeah, and so,
Shannon? All right, thank you so much.
thank you all.
Thank you.
So with that, I don't know if there's any further discussion you'd like to have at this time, but, okay.
Fair enough.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, I take it that we will then, what's the process we need to go through here? I don't think we're prepared to make any decisions today, and we haven't seen the documentation.
Yeah, so what we did with the RFQ is we issued the RFQ and you appointed a selection committee. That selection committee is Matt and Paul and Gary. So Matt, Paul, and Gary got together and did some preliminary rankings and invited these 3 companies in with the idea that we need, and I think the commission needed to hear more. But what your RFQ says is that that committee is supposed to rank and tell you what their top-ranked firm is.
What's their schedule for doing that?
Well, we've already met and done the initial review. We have an initial ranking we could share with you.
Yeah, or with further clarifications made today, more information today, I mean, I think there's no reason why it couldn't be amended, given that there's some outstanding questions, I think, that were answered today. So my recommendation would be the selection committee goes back, what they heard today, looks at their review and say, what do we think based on what we heard today, and then give you a recommendation. And then you say, okay, go negotiate a contract with whoever is ranked. It's most qualified, but there's really a great divide in proposed price here too, and so that's a significant factor. I mean, you're talking anywhere from $500,000.
Well, it's not just price, it's also strategy.
Strategy and what you're getting, yeah.
There's a big philosophical difference of how do you get from point A to point B.
Yeah, it's not really apples to apples, and I struggle with, are these responses, are they responsive to, is our SOQs responsive? I mean, if one is kind of a project manager, one that is, said we can do the analytics, we can do the reports, we can do that. A couple said we can also give you legal services, and so they were really, there was a great variety in the proposed services. So if there's any more direction you want to give the selection committee, I'm sure the selection committee would be open to hearing that, whether that's today or a future meeting. But our criteria and our request for qualifications is fairly broad, but they need to go back, I think, after what they heard today and finish the ranking.
I
as well.
definitely think it would assist the committee to know what the commissioner's philosophy is now that you've heard kind of a variety of approaches to this particular project, because we didn't know what we didn't know. And I think you heard some additional information today.
I just feel like a lot of this conversation was about phase 2 of this project, and not enough of the focus was on phase 1. I mean, I certainly heard, you know, the issue that Dave pointed out was that, you know, there was some view that incumbents won't come to the table, and then there was a view that no, actually they will. If you put the money out there, they will come, and that's consistent with some of the things that Dave and others have been hearing from potential partners in the community. What you know, the piece that I thought we were trying to understand is not who would manage the project once it's done, or is to really understand what the needs are with some proposals around how we could address those needs. And so, like, this last conversation was super helpful in that, you know, looking at what ARPA dollars could cover, ARPA dollars could cover this specific investment, but there may be communities that still need to be served that wouldn't be served by this solution. But here's another solution that maybe if the county wanted to put some dollars in or something that were different to be able to meet those needs. Like, that's what I, you know, really want to understand is like, okay, what are the needs in the county? Where actually are we with the build out to see the opportunities? And then, you know, there's a million ways perhaps to kind of get to what do we actually do? I'm just not, you know, I'm not sold on what, I don't have an option I'm trying to go to. What I'm trying to understand is where are we really? And what would meet the needs of all of these communities? And how do these various funding streams support those goals?
I appreciate that. From my perspective, I don't think we need to engage the individual communities. I think we need to set a standard of we want high-speed internet throughout this county, serving the most people possible, with a focus on rural communities and income-assisted type of folks, the low-income areas. I think if we focus on that and we say, these are the, and again, I don't know what they are. I mean, it seems like Paul's rolling them off the top of his head. These are what the minimums should be. That's all I care about. I mean, what's the community going to say? We want, just like Paul said.
But a lot of those local communities are also investing in this. I mean, so I think the art meets the science is kind of understanding what local communities are investing in with their pools of ARPA dollars and other investments that they're making. It's like, you know, we want to understand the whole picture and where we can be the difference maker to leverage all of these dollars, including private sector dollars, but also the other public sector dollars that are being invested. I think you lose that opportunity to take this broad view if you don't engage with the city of Springboro and the city of Mason and others that are actively putting fiber in the ground. That to me is like.
But I don't need a consultant to ask Springboro, how much money do you have, and are you willing to chip it into the bigger pot, you know, relative to specific the city of Springboro, that, hey, that, you know, you're gonna be paying this part, you know, because you've got this money, and all of a sudden our pot goes from $5 million to $15 million if you include everybody, if 99% of the people in the county are gonna get the access.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we kind of, to Adam's point, I think what we saw with the responses that we received is there were two different philosophies of how to go about it. There was a couple firms that responded with we're going to go in and do a very upfront, heavy due diligence period to, you know, to Commissioner Jones's point, gather all this data, give you a report that shows you the lay of the land and some recommendations on how to proceed. Then we had some other firms like Morley that came in and said, a lot of that you can shift off to the private companies, the providers, to put the onus on them to go out and tell you. So it's really it comes down to, do we sort of want to dictate out to the companies, here's what's important, here's what, based off of our consultant and our report that we've got, whether it's county infrastructure or different communities that we need to service, or do we want the private sector to come and tell us, here are the gaps, and here's how we think best to plug those gaps. I think that's kind of the philosophical question of, do we want to tell them or have them tell us?
Right, and Adam asked a good question. Where are we coming from? Obviously, the committee has now heard a couple of different views, and then the other thing that I'm very clear, I don't want to be an internet service provider in this county. Period. And so when people are talking about that, not a chance, and you guys know it better than anybody, because Gary back there is going to be like, wait, I don't need one more job. I don't need to run
I'm glad you said Gary and not somebody else.
So,
Or Chris, no.
so, yeah, we want to serve the most folks possible with, and honestly, my slant, and again, when that guy walked in, I was like, man, this is, you know, quick, you know, that they're not taking it very seriously, but that approach was exactly what I was looking for. Is, again, I've heard too many private sector people telling me they all want this. There's so much money coming this way. They want to do this. And this guy's like, of course they want to do it. All you really need is to tell them how you want it done, and they will come.
Well, I guess a way to find that out is
to do it.
Is to say, we're willing to put $5 million ARPA, here are the deal, you know, who's interested? I mean, that seems like a very reasonable approach. Like, I'm certainly not opposed to that, but this board was reluctant to do that because they didn't understand why this was even needed. But if we've overcome that hurdle, I certainly would support, if we're able to do this, Adam. Like, I know we have this RFQ out there to be able to say, you know what, maybe we want to give this a shot and put an RFP out there that says we're willing to put, I'm just making this up, $5 million of ARPA funds, and we want to cover, you know, as much as possible at these minimums to be ARPA qualified, and see what others.
With a focus on low
income
and
and rural communities.
Yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't scrap this RFQ, communicate to all the firms that gave you statements of qualifications, and say the Board of County Commissioners have decided, if this is what you decide, to say, we're not going to move forward with a consultant firm to do this preliminary study.
This guy could be our consultant. I mean, because again, in some ways, he's the one that came and told us about it. I mean,
well,
could we do it ourselves? Could we do this?
Or he just, though, told us what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, he is the one who told us what to do.
Well, let me see if I understand a distinction here. The first two proposal people were actually kind of doing a big report, which is what we requested, and a big look at this stuff. And then they were also, one of their marketing things to us is, and we can do the end project. We can.
The first one did.
The first one did. Yeah, I think the second one was doing the same thing, but maybe I'm wrong, because one of the things that I would look from our committee is to tell me, what did we just hear? We've not actually looked at their detailed proposals, and then, but I also completely agree with Commissioner Young, and I think actually Commissioner Jones, we're all kind of maybe reaching the same conclusion. The last person who presented made a lot of sense to me, because really, I don't want our county to be in this business. We already have, and that's why I was asking my questions to these people about,
the incumbents and the private people that are already doing it and that are already out there providing this service, but are not providing it everywhere. And so we were thinking with this request for proposal that we needed to understand what's going on, what the needs are, who does what. But I also get the feeling like that probably is not that mysterious a thing, and probably doesn't need us to spend a lot of money to figure it out, because my guess is the incumbents and the various jurisdictions already know the answer to that, and we can probably get that information fairly easily. And then the question is, since we have to decide another thing, and I think you're hearing from all three of us that we don't want to be the provider. We don't want to be the engine of providing a lot of county general fund tax dollars to do some big expensive project. We want to use the ARPA funds as they're restricted in how they're used, so we want to use them, and basically we want to say, we're willing to take this amount of money, which we've been allocated for this process, and we'd like to know who would take this money as the contribution from us, and then meet the needs that our community has that are easily identifiable, and then say, what is your solution, people? Is that kind of where we're coming out? Because I think that's what the last person told us.
Yes.
And I think we all, even though the second people were very slick, very impressive, spent a lot of time and effort to meet our request for proposal, and I was very impressed with them. And the first people were very impressive too. But at the same time, because of our county and how we function and the way we function, not on a shoestring, because we provide great services, but we don't like that. We don't like to get out of our wheel set. We like the private sector. We want them to provide this service. We don't want to displace them, but at the same time, we want to meet the needs. And since the government is providing us with this cache of funds, I think we're coming to a conclusion that we'd like to go maybe in a slightly different course, but I'd also like our committee to report back to us with their recommendations. Does any of this make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, if Adam is saying to us that we can sort of set this process aside or allow them to do some additional due diligence in there at your request, but then to put another process in place that says, with X amount of dollars under these circumstances, come one, come all, give us your proposal.
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay with the board, maybe I would suggest that, to Adam's point, maybe if the review committee would, meet here in the next couple of days, let us maybe digest what we heard in the presentations, we'll come back to you with our recommendations, see if it's.
That's a good idea.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Chris got 30 seconds.
All right, yeah. Chris,
I have a hard stop at 5:12.
Yeah.
do we want to take a quick recess at all?
No.
No.
Okay, good enough.
We only got 10 or 15 minutes, yeah.
Chris.
Hustle up.
Huss.
Hustle up, Frank. Great, all right.
Commissioner Jones has a hard stop, and we have one after you, so.
Great, all right. I think we have a small presentation. We appreciate the time that we have today with the work session. The topic we want to talk about is some of our different service areas. I'm going to skip this and just head straight into it. We want to talk to you about our water systems and how many water systems we have. Right now, we operate 5 public water systems that are regulated by the US EPA, or the Ohio EPA, and they're located throughout the county. And that's what we have highlighted on the map here. You see, the largest one we have, the 2 large ones are Franklin Clear Creek, and then down south we have the Richard Reniker. We have Sociaville also down south, but then up north we have 2 more, which is Pennyroyal, and then we have a very small one called Sharts Road. And that's what we want to focus on, is Sharts Road today, talking about the service to those customers, those 54 customers. Over the years, last 15 years, we've tried to optimize our operation by consolidating public water systems. So back when I started 15 years ago, 16 years ago, we had, I think, up to 10 public water systems. And as we've extended water lines throughout the county, we've been able to take some of these water systems out of service. So we have, Village of Corwin used to be one, Township Line Road used to be a separate water system. So right now, we've been able to whittle that down to 5 water systems that we have now in operation. Our long-term goal in the next 5 years is we would like to further consolidate that down to 2 water systems, which would be the Pennyroyal water system and then the rest of our customers. So what we're going to do, and we've talked to Ohio EPA, is we're going to combine the Franklin Clear Creek one, we're going to combine Reniker, and we're going to combine Sociaville into one large, massive combined water system. And then we'll have Pennyroyal, and then based off of your discussions today, you'll tell us whether we should continue serving Sharts Road or not. The Sharts Road Public Water System is our smallest system. It serves 54 customers. It consists of roughly 4,000 feet of public water main. It's a system where we buy water from the city of Springboro to serve these customers. So we buy it wholesale through a master meter. The water lines along Sharts Road were installed in 1995. And it's kind of expensive to serve these customers because we're purchasing the water
Can we
from
cut to the
Springboro.
chase? Yeah, so we're buying it, it's Springboro's right there, we get it, so
And
there,
then
there's.
all the money we collect from these customers, we pay to Springboro as.
Why
as the
can't
cost.
Springboro do this?
That's what we're gonna talk about today. Our recommendation is potentially to serve these customers over to Springboro.
And will they take them?
Yes, they will take them, but,
Give us the buck, we're saying yes.
all right, this
except
is,
give us
this is the
buck.
kicker here. This is the kicker, where when we release, if we were to release these customers to the city of Springboro, what happens is they will be charged Springboro rates, and Springboro charges outside the city rates to these customers. And the rates are different. They are at a higher rate structure than we are. We would like to do this, but I think the only way we can really do this effectively with these customers is that we would have to slowly increase these rates to the customers over the next 10 to 15 years.
Is that your recommendation?
That is our recommendation, to continue, yes. We would like to ultimately eliminate this water system.
But what advantage to us is that?
We go back to this slide here, and these are all the loophole, all the hurdles we have to serve these customers. We're out there every day. We have to have somebody out there every day to collect water samples and to test chlorine out in
On just 54.
on 54 customers. So the same requirements that we have to serve thousands of customers falls to these 54 customers.
Can't we just turn them over and then we subsidize, for some transition period, the rates to where it slowly adjusts up to the Springboro rates over time? That we give some consideration to
There'd be
Springboro for taking them on?
quantitative easing of that, yes.
Is that why you're suggesting the 10-year
That is
glide path?
So, yes, that is why. So, in the bottom here, we're talking about increasing the rates over 10 to 15 years, and then potentially providing Springboro with a lump sum to kind of make up that difference.
So is this let me understand this. The bi-monthly water bill, so if you multiply this bill times 6, that's its yearly bill, correct?
Yes.
And that's for
That's
water.
our bill. So we bill bi-monthly, they bill monthly. So you'll see that their rates are roughly twice our rates.
Their rates are approximately, Springboro's rates are approximately
Yeah,
twice?
36
Twice
a
our
month
rates.
Okay,
versus
so that's,
34 bi.
okay, that's pretty significant. Now, how are we able to get such a low rate from Springboro? Is that a contractual right we have?
It is a contractual, yes, it is
How long does that
contractual.
contract last?
That contract, I think, probably expires in the next couple of years.
When that contract expires, what will happen?
We will have to negotiate a new rate with the city of Springboro.
Why would, and will
For the
Springboro give
purchase.
us, why is Springboro giving us, when we have to, in a couple of years or a few years, whatever it is, whenever the contract expires, why is it that Springboro is going to negotiate with us for 54 customers a rate that is half of the rate that they're charging?
Because
to
we
their-
are, we're providing all the service to the customers. We're the service provider.
So
They don't
they're
have
just
to do
giving us
anything. They're just-
water. Right,
They're just giving us wholesale water. So we bill the customer, we serve the customer. If there's any complaints, we go.
So when we service the customer at our expense, we're not charging them for that?
No, we charge them, we collect them. Yes, we bill them every month, but all the money that we collect from these customers, we turn over to the city of Springboro.
But what you're telling me is that we are basically paying for a water amount to Springboro, and then we're providing a service that costs us a considerable amount of time and effort.
That's correct. I
and
mean,
that
it's,
is not being billed.
yes, our customers, all the remaining customers we have are subsidizing these areas, because this is a high-cost area for us.
That's, I mean, but that's also true in other areas of the county, where we are buying high water.
Right.
Wholesale water from MSD, but the customers in the south aren't absorbing all of it. It's a socialized rate through here, but the cost associated with these 54 customers, that's why you want to get rid of them, is the cost to serve them is so much higher.
The cost to serve them is the cost
It's
of
just the
water.
operations more than anything, right?
It's a combination of, we're not taking in any revenue from these customers. We're just taking that revenue and paying for the water from the city of Springboro. But then at the same time, we're having a very high level of cost of all the testing we have to do, and our employees going out there on a daily basis to collect samples, and then all the reporting we have to do, and all the plans that we have, contingency plans and the EPA
Does
required
Springboro want
plans.
these customers?
They're not opposed to it. I mean, we have had discussions with them, and they are open to that idea of taking these customers on.
And essentially, they're charging them a higher rate because they look at them as, they're not in the city, they're not paying an earnings tax, so it's almost like, a township is using our city services, therefore you don't get the same deal as being in the city, but that sounds like a negotiation. Could we?
That is, I mean, there are other areas in the surrounding area of Springboro that are their customers. They're in the township, so they have a certain number of out-of-the-city customers that they serve right now.
So let me back up for just a minute here with this. So is there some sort of social contract or some obligation that we had to supply water to these individuals in the first place?
I don't believe that's the case, because the water line that was installed in 1995, and it was done under an assessment. So we did construct it, we charged but there's no obligation to continue to serve these people.
Well, why did what was that?
But I'll leave that up to the prosecutor to respond.
But this is obviously in a township,
It is in the township.
and we're obligated to supply services to townships.
It's
are we not?
it's our service area unless the county releases that service area.
My question is this, and maybe you can't answer it. Do we have an obligation, even though it is in a township, and I would assume in a township, we have an obligation to supply certain services like water to it? Is that true? And if true, are we sort of violating or somehow not honoring our social contract with township residents by releasing this contract to Springboro and then subjecting them to a very high out-of-city rate?
We have situations the past 10 years where
Well,
we
hang-
have
hang on,
turned
let me ask
customers,
him a
we have
question.
turned customers over to other entities before. Like,
I
an
get that,
example
but you
is
know-
in Western Water. We turned customers over in Western Water over to them back 10 years ago, where they were our customers, but based off of negotiations with Western Water and coming through the consent decree to settle the consent decree, we turned a certain number of customers over to Western Water for service. So, I mean, there is some precedence there of us doing this, but I'll let the prosecutor
I just want to know what the
answer that.
legality is.
Your question is really, do we have a legal, we being the county, have a legal obligation to provide
Yes.
water to this rural area or township outside the municipal corporation limits? And the answer is generally no. However, in 1995, these who became customers probably petitioned, or at least a handful of them did, and the prior practice of the board always was a 51% test. If 51% of the people in the area wanted it, then the commissioners would do it by assessment project. So they did it by an assessment project. They agreed to provide that service. If we turn it over to another utility provider like the city, the customers are still getting that service. They're getting water, so it's not a problem. The rub is going to be what the customer's position is if they know that their rates are going to be doubled.
If not tripled. For, 14 customers, 34 versus 48 monthly, their bill's gonna go from $200 to $600.
Yeah, but my question, Bruce, is are we violating some right that they have now enjoyed, that we accepted, that we've been providing them with back, starting in 1995, and that by doing what is being proposed, are we doing something contrary to a right that they have, where they're gonna say, well, wait a second, we petitioned or whatever to be part of your territory, you accepted it, this is something that was done, we enjoyed that, now you're abandoning us. I'm not saying that we are, but because we're still making sure that they're provided with water, but in effect, we're saying, we're not gonna be the actual provider any longer. We never have been, really. We've been contracting with the city to do this. But in the same time, we have protected them, we've subsidized their rates, which I assume is because we have to charge our customers all the same rate, is that right?
We provide a uniform rate across our
So because we
customer
have to have
structure.
uniform rates, in effect, what's been happening is that we have subsidized those areas where we are actually providing the water through another service, and if it's more, we've subsidized it. And basically what's happening is that the other ratepayers in our system are the ones paying for this.
That's correct.
And my only issue is, and I don't have, obviously, I want to save our total rate base money. I want to do something that's fair, but I don't want to do something that is contrary to the acquired and/or, ceded rights to 54 customers who now have some interest in this and may find out, of course, they're going to find out and have a right to know what's going on, that we've done this, and now we're sort of kind of to make it more palatable, giving a 10-year subsidy still, but then after that, they're at the mercy of a jurisdiction, which is Springboro supplying, I'm sorry, are they contiguous with this?
Yes, they are contiguous,
Why wouldn't
absolutely
they annex
contiguous.
them into their
Because
city?
these customers are existing customers, they're not gonna annex in, because there's, the benefit they have, what is the benefit of annexing in for this, for the customers? I mean, they would pay a higher, income rate, they would have an income tax to pay to the city
Well, they only
for
have
the
an
same.
income tax.
For the
if they-
benefits.
If they work in a township and not a city, but if the people there, and it's only 54 people, if most of them worked in a city already, which wouldn't surprise me, they're already paying an earnings tax. In fact, what people don't realize is if you live in a township, you work in a city, you're effectively double taxed. And they don't realize that they're paying higher real estate tax rates in townships, because that's how they make their money, and they don't have an earnings tax. And then the people are at the same time are paying an earnings tax in the city, and they get no credit for it, where a lot of jurisdictions give credit, because they're different taxes.
The annexations would have to grow on a house-to-house basis, so you're asking for 54 annexations into the city.
Each one would have to agree to that.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's a policy decision that Springboro's making, not you. And Springboro wants to provide services like utilities outside its corporate limits. That's their decision to make. Other communities that you'd be familiar with would be Mason, and Mason makes just the opposite policy decision. They don't do that, but Springboro apparently does.
Right. I mean, well, Mason will provide services like this outside their territory if the council expressly provides permission, or if they annex in.
In my 31 years, that at almost my recollections was that was with a pre-annexation agreement, that within a certain calendar period of time, they had to annex in to be able to get the benefit of those services.
Now, I'm familiar with the law in Mason, And I agree with you, Bruce, that I think has been typical of what they've done. But they have the right, by council approval, to service
Sure.
people outside their
Sure.
territory.
And Lebanon's the same way, and just like the Mike Williams development off 42 or Columbia Road, they provided sewer there outside their corporate limits. They didn't require any annexation. They weren't contiguous anyway. Well, they were because of the railroad.
But coming back to the question that I've got, Bruce, is there a legal argument that the 54 people have in light of the past that what we would do now by shifting this over to the Springboro is somehow a violation of their rights? Do you believe it is or it's not?
It's not a substantive due process right, but it's a potential contract argument that they have a contract. They petitioned, they signed a petition and waiver.
But hold on, I don't know if that's correct, Bruce, because I don't think, for them, all 54 would have to sign a petition statement and waiver, and I don't believe that was the case on I've never seen 54 customers sign petition statements.
I don't know what the
and
history is.
waivers.
We'd have to look at the history.
Well, I think we
So
should take a
there
look
was a
at that.
public hearing,
Yeah,
public
we're gonna have
notification
to
process.
reconsider this. We're not gonna make a decision right now, but it's on the radar now.
Okay,
That's good.
very good. I'll schedule the time to.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Yes.
Just really briefly, the developer of the CRA agreement on the prison land has requested an extension of the dates for the performance metrics. We would recommend pushing them back by 2 years just due to late closing on the land, supply chain issues that are affecting building materials getting in. The late date of the closing is the main reason. They missed the entire fall construction season last year. It was an issue at the state level, nothing local. So that's the first item, and if amenable, we would start the process of getting with the school district for necessary approvals. It would come back in front of you for final approval. So that's the first item.
Fine.
Okay. Second item is, and I don't know if, I got an exhibit here, I'll just show you. This is a temporary construction easement that has also been requested. This is off of Union Road, which would wrap around through land that the county owns just to the north. There's some water facilities out there, and I've had a conversation with Chris already, and he said it would not impact any of the county's operations on that site. But the reason for the developer requesting this is, you'll notice it allows them to get around the stream. Otherwise, they would have to build a bridge over the stream in order to get access to the site
So
immediately.
they just want an easement, temporary easement for
Correct.
construction purposes?
Yep.
Oh, that's fine too.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, the only thing I thought of, is there anything we want out of them, like a little landscaping around our building or something? Yeah, I mean, do we want, not really?
We don't have anything there. No,
Well, then-
compensation, a couple $1,000 compensation. We farm,
It's
that
temporary.
property's
Yeah.
renting out to farmers, so in case the farmers affected at all.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, very good. So we'll get that drafted up and back in front of you.
All right, anything else? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, thank you.
Dave, when will you be back and we'll get Chris back on the agenda? The next two